morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening in Europe, in Romania. We will start our video conference. There are a lot of people that are in the process of joining our session today. For the ones that do not know me, I'm Cosmin Dumitrescu. I'm the Consul General of Romania in Los Angeles, and I will be your host today. I welcome you to the Consul General of Romania, and also welcome to the Communication, Professional and Social Competence Development Tools, New Pedagogy and Skill Development Methods for Next-Gen University Graduates Symposium. So this is the third symposium in a series of 6 that the Consulate General of Romania in Los Angeles organized in order to mark the celebration, the anniversary of the 10th year since the signing of the joint declaration on the implementation of the strategic partnership between the USA and Romania. This is a fine political moment in the bilateral relations between Romania and the United States, and we chose to celebrate it with scientific conferences that aim to showing the world the contribution of the Romanian-American scientists, professors, researchers for the development of the global society. Started with space sciences when we had the opportunity of hearing or listening to specialists, Romanian-American specialists from NASA, Blue Origin, SpaceX here in the United States, and also from the Romanian Space Agency in Romania. Then we continued with medical sciences symposium, and we had amazing specialists in medicine and pharmaceutical sciences that found the cure for the most common blood cancer, for example. And now we continue with a very attractive topic, communication and education sciences. I was talking to our panelists today 40 minutes ago, and they told us how they think, how they found out that everybody knows everything about communication. And of course, that's not true. I'm looking forward to see what they are going to tell us today. We were supposed to have with us directly the Minister of Education, Mr. Sorin Câmpeanu, but he called me right now telling me that he couldn't get out of a meeting. So I am authorized to transmit his salute and his wishes for success for this symposium. And of course, that we will have the honor of having him with us in the next session. Allow me please to check out all the people that already connected to our session. We already have guests from here, from the United States, representing the board of supervisors of LA County, the head of protocol, my dear friend Lourdes Sab. Welcome, Lourdes. Thank you for joining us. And we also have a specialist in communication from here, from Los Angeles, but not only, not Los Angeles and Romania, or Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Phoenix, and Romania. We also have with us a dear friend, professor from the University of Manchester, Professor Max Levin. Welcome, Professor. Thank you for coming and for joining us. Allow me please to start by telling you that we also have a dear friend and guest of us, a VIP from Romania. We have with us Mrs. Oana Ursache. She is the head of the department for the Romanians abroad inside the Romanian government. Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Ursache. She is also a professor, associate professor at the University of Granada in Spain. So she's here in a double position as a professor, as a scholar, and a representative of the government. So allow me please to invite Mrs. Ursache to tell us several words on behalf of the Romanian government. Mrs. Ursache, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this very interesting and very useful conference on what preoccupies all of us most. Because we have to move very fast from one way of teaching and evaluating and communicating to our students to a completely new way of seeing our job and our profession. Well, in the large context of our lives that suffered a great deal of weak inclusion into the new technologies. Well, the job of the professor, of the teacher, and the blindness and participation of the students are just one small part of the huge change we all suffered. So for the first time in history, most of the teachers are less prepared than their students because they were born with the telephones in their hands. They've got skills just by birth that we have to learn to use them, to convert them in very comfortable methods of teaching and evaluating. Forgive me for insisting so much in evaluation, because I think that this was the worst part. For me, this was the worst part, because everything we knew that can give us a proper level of the acknowledgement that our students acknowledged, well, all of a sudden had no measurable measure. So we were trying to see how can they prove they know everything they know throughout a platform as Zoom or Google Meeting or Classroom or so on. So I think this was the first huge barrier to see how our students are sometimes better than us in using technology. And they adapted quicker and better than us. Well, of course, for us, the teachers, we've got the knowledge. But then this accident that happened worldwide with the pandemic year we had just showed us that maybe, just maybe, we are not preparing our students for the life they will have. And when I say students, I mean children from 3 to 18 and from 19 to 24. We thought their life would be in one, would have one image, one reality, and all of a sudden we realized that maybe not, just might be not. And then here we are trying to figure it out, what is what our students need for their adult life, how their life would be in 20 years' time, how would everything evaluate up to a point that maybe, just maybe, we can't even imagine right now. Because we had this experience. I think we are in a point, let's name it T0, where from everything is possible, and we just have to free our imagination and try to help these kiddos and these youngers and these students to be prepared for what life would mean in 20 years' time or 30 years' time. Because we knew what jobs we have to prepare them for. We knew what the close future needs from them. But all of a sudden, we realized that maybe our life would be, from now on, part technical and part, I don't know, life experience as we knew it. I just come back right now from the Embassy of Brazil in Romania that organized first concert. I was in a live concert with real people in front of me. And with real people you could talk to next to me. So I was so glad to come back to my former life. And 5 minutes later, we are again in this Zoom meeting because it's very cheap. And we are so close to one another. And it took me 5 minutes to come from the street, from the embassy building to our building and to meet you from Los Angeles in Bucharest. And this came to stay. I don't think we should give up to what we got. And I just hope I myself as a teacher, as a professor, would adapt enough not to make my students laugh at me because I don't put my share screen well, or because of a new platform they invented and I'm not used to it, and so on and so forth. I wish you luck, and I wish you courage and guts to imagine how the world would be in 20 years' time. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm keen to learn everything from you.
Thank you, State Secretary Ursaki, for your intervention and for your kind words. Yes, you're right. The paradigm of teaching, the education paradigm is changing with a speed that we cannot catch up with. And of course, that any teacher, any professor has the emotion of being left behind by technology or by mentality changes. And that of course, it's very well applied to any profession that involves communication and, of course, teaching, or I don't know how, the thing that we call professional continuous development skill. So that's why we thought about organizing this symposium. That's why we're trying to bring together some of the finest professionals that the Romanian-American community has in the academic community here on the West Coast. Today, we have the opportunity of having two amazing specialists from Romania, Professor Elena Bargăoanu, the Dean of the Faculty of Communication from one of the best universities in Romania, in Bucharest, and also from the industry we have Mr. Radu Koșarcă, a well-known specialist in communication. Also, we succeeded in having with us, in spite of the very busy program in the West morning, 4 amazing professors from the United States. We have with us the Presidential Professor Ilana Orlic, dear friend and colleague of mine from the Arizona State University. We also have 2 wonderful professors from the University of Washington, from Seattle, and also we have from Los Angeles Professor Aura Imbarus. I think that the presentations of these specialists, of these magisters, of these professors, are going to be very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to everything they are going to let us know today. And I'm really curious and ready to listen to first to Professor Alina Bargăoanu. And allow me, please, to introduce to Professor Bargăoanu, a very well-known specialist in communication from Romania, a very highly appreciated. So, Professor Alina Bargăoanu is a Romanian communication scholar with a strong interest in digital transformation, strategic communication, analyzing and countering disinformation. She is the Dean of the College of Communication and Public Relations at the National University of Political Studies and Public Administration from Bucharest. She is currently a member of the advisory board of the European Digital Media Observatory and an affiliate member of the European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats in Helsinki. She was a visiting scholar at Minda, the Gunzburg Center for European Study at Harvard University in October 2018, March 2019. In 2018, she served as a member of the high-level expert group on fake news and online disinformation at the European Commission. She also has published extensively, both for the Romanian and the English press, on topics related to COVID-19, infodemic, conspiracy theories, viralization mechanisms, public trust, and government communications. Professor Bargăoanu, thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you for being today with us and for sharing your priceless knowledge in communication sciences. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm extremely honored to be here today. Probably you have already noticed the irony in using the word here. What does here mean these days? I'm very glad to be here with you in an online environment. I'm extremely honored to celebrate together with you the 10-year anniversary of the US-Romanian Strategic Partnership. Since you come from the field of education, you are aware that education and cultural exchanges represent a strong dimension of the strategic partnership. You are all familiar, for example, with the strength of the Fulbright exchanges between Romania and the United States. And as a professor, as an educator, as a parent, I'm very glad that we can celebrate this strategic partnership that, according to my sincere knowledge, has brought a lot of stability, security, and well-being to the Romanian citizens. And I can only express my hope that this partnership will grow. And I can only express my deep hope that education and cultural exchanges will grow even more vigorously. Let me start sharing my slides. Thank you very much for the introduction. I hope that my presentation will be up to that introduction. Indeed, I am a communication scholar in Romania. This has been my field of expertise for my entire career. I started with studying mass communication, the history of news, and for the past 3 years, I have been deeply involved in analyzing this topic of disinformation. Right now, I'm a member of the advisory board of the European Digital Media Observatory. For example, talking about the transatlantic partnership, one of the ideas is to extend this European Digital Media Observatory towards the transatlantic world. So the idea is to have a common space to talk about the internet, to raise awareness about the digital transformations. And I'm very confident that with the new administration in Washington, the extension of this kind of partnership is really, really possible. For the purposes of today's presentation and today's conference, which is really high level, and I'm deeply honored and overwhelmed by the invitation, I have chosen to talk very, very briefly about education and critical thinking as long-term answers to a contested and uncertain world. First of all, let me specify that this expression, contested and uncertain world, does not belong to me. It is a wording that comes from a recent report that was published by the National Council of Intelligence. It was about a report about 2040 trends. And really, I was struck that one of the trends that this high-level report emphasized related to my concerns about polarization, about the drivers of polarization, about the impact of polarization, and the estimate of this high-level report, again drafted by the national intelligence community in the United States, was that if not properly managed, polarization will become a very alarming trend. So I have structured my presentation around these 4 topics. Again, I will address them very briefly because the topic is very complex. So I will try to make a summary of the current and emerging dynamics in the transatlantic world, first thing. Then I will talk briefly about the drivers of the current dynamics, how we ended up in this state of polarization and stuff like this. Then I will talk specifically about polarization as an alarming centrifugal force in our societies, in the Romanian society, in the US society, in most of societies of the transatlantic world. And I will draw the conclusion that education and critical thinking can become cures to this kind of forces. So this is how I structure my presentation. Again, the topic is very vast, is very complex, and I hope that today's discussion will only be the beginning of a very nice conversation among experts. Among the current and emerging dynamics of today's world, I chose for the purposes of today's presentation, to talk about the fact, to redraw your attention about such wording as post-truth. This is a phrase that I'm sure you have heard of very obsessively for the past 4 or 5 years. We are talking about a post-factual world. Some experts which drafted the proceedings of the Munich conference said that we are talking about post-truth, post-order, or even post-Western world. There is that notion that was drafted by these authors from RAND Corporation about truth decay, and I will come back to it. New York Times said that we are dealing with a post-text world because the written text is no longer so relevant as it used to be. About post-fact or post-reason or post-privacy world, and even with the emergence of deep fakes and artificial intelligence, there is a lot of discussion about post-human world. What I am interested in is that the effects that, again, according to the National Council of Intelligence, these effects to be expected to be felt up until 2040 are polarization, contestation, political and social anxiety. So again, this is one of the estimates that this is a strong, these are strong social phenomena today. And there is the estimate, there is the expectation that if not properly managed, this effects polarization, contestation, political and social anxiety will dominate the world in 2040. How we ended up here, what are the drivers of the current dynamics, and it fits into what State Secretary said, for example, related to technology change. According to my knowledge, according to my inquiry, the drivers of the current dynamics are, as you follow on the slide, the technological change, the hyperconnectivity of today's world, the explosion of digital platforms, the information overload, identity politics, divisive leadership, failure of the education system, and disinformation or misinformation. So this will be the drivers of the current dynamics that again created this toxic mix of polarization, contestation, uncertainty, and social anxiety. I will elaborate a little bit on the technological change, on explosion of digital platforms, failure of education system, and disinformation. So I think that one of the most paradoxical characteristics of today's world is that it is a hyper-connected world. But paradoxically, there is a cost to this hyperconnectivity, to this interconnectivity. And I think that during the pandemic, especially, we have all been reminded that there is a cost to the high level of interconnectivity. The pandemic was global, the spread of the pandemic was global, the spread of the infodemic was global. So I think that again, I have been fascinated by the fact that again, the interconnectivity works both ways. It is a double-edged sword, if you allow me. So again, paradoxically enough, hyperconnectivity has divided and fragmented people, communities, and countries. So this is a very highly paradoxical effect of the high levels of hyperconnectivity, because this hyperconnectivity creates and amplifies tensions at all levels. It leads to the emergence of societies which are divided over core values, over facts, over interests, and over goals. So somehow I'm glad that I managed, that I opened this conversation, because again, I think that this is one of the most interesting and one of the most paradoxes of our world, that contrary to popular wisdom and contrary to popular exuberance, hyperconnectivity has led up until now to more polarization across people inside communities and inside countries. This is highly connected to the explosion of digital platforms, because the digital platforms again has created huge opportunity for new connections. It has brought us together, for example, but also these digital platforms are polarizing. So they are polarizing people's perceptions about facts, about policies, about public institutions, events, moral issue, and social trends. Why does this happen? So again, I'm a huge fan of technology. I study technology a lot, but I think that one of the awareness that was brought by the pandemic, for example, is that digital platforms are, as I have said, double-edged swords, because the technology behind the digital platforms allow for the emergence of like-minded territorial communities. So it is now in the current technological environment, it is easy for people to affiliate with others around the world who share common characteristics, views, and beliefs. The problem that is amplified by technology is that these like-minded communities become highly homogeneous, and at some point they become very hostile to one another when sharing the same territory. So the digital platforms have led to the emergence of what in the literature is called information silos, or echo chambers of people who share similar views, pay attention to the same set of facts. They reinforce their beliefs and their understanding of the reality. So again, one of the paradoxical effects of technology is that they create like-minded communities which are not affiliated to a certain territory, and they reinforce identity groups, and they amplify the natural tendencies of similar people to sit together. As you probably remember, I said that the drivers that led us to this state of polarization is technology. I have talked about it. The second is the explosion of digital platforms and their capacity to create like-minded, highly homogeneous communities, which can become very hostile to each other. Another point that I want to make is that this state of polarization, I think, is a symptom of the failure of the education system. I hope I'm not too harsh with the people who come from universities, but right now in Romania, probably in the United States, education is a polarizing force. So instead of becoming a cohesive force, it tends to be a polarizing force. So in principle, schools and universities are places in which we imagine communities and places in which we teach or we learn solidarity, and in places in which we teach and we learn critical thinking, meaning responsible citizenship. I'm saying that today's state of polarization is a failure of the education system, because I think that the education system has failed to come up with responsible citizenship, by meaning this the ability to get along with each other, the ability to listen to other people, the ability to recognize that society runs on solidarity, the ability to separate fact from fiction, science from pseudoscience, the ability to develop a sense of truth and respect for expertise, and the ability to engage in reason and facts-based conversations. So from this slide, we can see the way forward, but in order to overcome the current situation of polarization, I think that schools and universities should become places which fulfill this kind of mission, places in which, with one word, we learn how to communicate, how to share a reality. And the last driver of the current situation is misinformation and disinformation, because both are corrosive to the sense of expertise, and they are corrosive to the capacity to tell fact from fiction, and corrosive to the capacity to care about the difference between facts and fiction, and they are corrosive to the sense of common purpose. According to my research, according to my knowledge, to deep observation of the Romanian space and at some point of the American space, I think that the current polarization in the transatlantic world, in some of the societies pertaining to the transatlantic world, is a more alarming trend than post-truth, post-fact and stuff like this. Of course, they are related. And because polarization is both cognitive, with people dwelling in alternative facts, cognitive war, epistemic coup, and we are talking about an emotional polarization which is identity driven. Let me draw your attention to what is towards the end of this slide, that today's polarization is a totally different phenomena compared to other periods in history, because we encounter phenomena such as the two-speed world, or the two-speed globalization, or the two-speed European Union, but on the same territory. So this is why I'm saying that polarization, as I defined it, and it is widely studied in the literature, is a both cognitive and emotional phenomena. And the problem is that we encounter this kind of two-speed world, two-speed globalization, two-speed transatlantic world on the same territory. I will try to go towards the end of my presentation. The thesis of my presentation is that critical thinking and education are long-term answers to this alarming trend of polarization. The downsides of this fact is that since they are long-term, it means that it will take a long period of time until we see final results. So critical thinking, I think, is one of in all reports about the jobs of the future, the skills of the future, critical thinking skills figure prominently, because the critical thinking skills are a fundamental cognitive resource. They create a new mindset, and they provide an era to the information overload. I think that critical thinking is an essential skill to responsible citizenship, as I have defined it before, meaning the capacity to communicate to live in a society and to have a common purpose. And now this is my last slide. I think that the most effective states will be those that can build societal consensus and trust toward collective education. I think that education, which right now seems to be more of a polarizing issue than a cohesive force in society, has the capacity to create the middle ground, to foster a sense of truth, to create agreement on facts, to create an agreement on common purpose, and to create a community of trust. From this point of view, in this sense, education equals social communication. So I think, again, my strong belief is that the most effective states will be those that can overcome the current states of cognitive and emotional polarization, and the states that will be managed to build societal consensus and trust toward collective action. So I hope that by creating this cognitive skill, critical thinking, and by regaining the purpose of education as trust, we will come back to this trust so communication means facts, means truth, and means trust. That was my background presentation. I'm very glad that I could open this conversation. And again, I'm looking forward to what the other panelists have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bagoman. If you can unshare the screen. Thank you very much. I loved your last slide with mixing the truth with trust in order to go ahead with our good society. We heard about how polarization is working. I would say bad working for the society, even if some engines of it, like technology, should bring people together. Sometimes it only separates them, and the communication suffers from that interview. We could see how you related critical thinking with responsible citizenship that any democratic society promotes. And we also could see how education should change in order to become a strong point for the future and not a vulnerability by promoting separation instead of cohesion. Thank you very much for your very synthetic presentation. We know that this field it's huge, it's really enormous in a quantity of information, and you succeeded in giving us a synthesis of this. And because we are talking about cohesion in society, I know that we have with us, and I'm going to take her by surprise. I don't know if Lourdes Sab
oh gosh,
excuse me. Oh gosh. So so Lourdes Sab is representing Los Angeles County. Allow me to give some background information. So Los Angeles County is the biggest county in the US. So it's more than 11, almost 12 million people. A very diverse community. And I say community because it comprehends from many points of view a lot of other type of communities. That is academic, ethnic, people coming from all over the world here and living the American dream. And it's practically more than half than the Romanian population in Romania. And about, if we're talking about cohesion, I always think about Los Angeles County and how Los Angeles County succeeded in building that kind of community. And that's why I'm taken by surprise, Lourdes. I apologize, Lourdes, for doing that, but you know me, so you're I can do that. So tell us several words about your opinion about how policies in Los Angeles County and how you succeeded in promoting this very successful communication about vaccination, for example, and because we're that reality right now. Can you share that with us, please, in, I don't know, in several minutes? And your message.
Thank you, Consul General. You scared me for a little bit. I thought you wanted me to comment on how the county gets together, period. But yes, if on health, I think I have to basically compliment our public health director and our system that the health director, oh, they made, how do I call it? They kept us safe by following the guidelines that were brought down, looking at them, translating them, and then they did their utmost to communicate and use all of us, myself included, to communicate the day-to-day changes. And by keeping us informed and being completely transparent, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think that we, as personally, gained our trust. And what they were telling us, if it was good news or bad news, we could trust that they were doing their best and being transparent. So I'm thinking that the constant communication and honest communication, I think, served us well. And our elected officials all basically followed. Nobody contradicted in terms of our leadership in the County of LA, the Board of Supervisors, the department heads, the 100,000 employees that worked under the county, all did our best. We were like little soldiers following the public health directives and communicating and in doing the work. So I think that the county residents not only heard the information through the many means, government, media, community partners, organizations, they heard the information and for the most part understood it. And I have to say that it was our public health director who led this effort with the support of our elected officials. So that's the partnership that I think made it happen. And I know I was the messenger that kept delivering to you the daily information. And I think that kept you informed as well as all the other sources of information that I'm sure you were receiving.
Thank you. Congratulations for how you worked as authorities here in the Los Angeles County and for how you organized the entire process, not only of communication but also crisis management system that you put in place here. It really is a model for the entire America and not only, also for Europe. I always give this example for how Los Angeles County did it. We call it a county, but it's much bigger compared to many countries in the world. Of course, that the challenges were huge. Having that many people in a restricted territory and crossing this kind of unmeasured crisis. So thank you very much, and I think I can speak on behalf of all of my European Union member states colleagues here representing here in Los Angeles for the amazing way in which you communicated with us in this pandemic. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good luck because over.
Soon we'll be in person.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. We are all looking forward to that. So now we're passing to the next presentation, and I have the pleasure of introducing to you Professor Ilana Orlic from Phoenix, from Arizona State University. Professor Ilana Orlic is President Professor of Romanian Studies, English and Comparative Literature, and teaches in the School of International Letters and Culture at the Arizona State University. The 2000 ASU Centennial Professor Dr. Orlic is also the Director of the Central European Cultural Collaborative and of the European Studies Certificate in SILC. Her books include Silent Bodies, Rediscovering the Women of Romanian Short Fiction, published at Columbia, UP in 2002, Articulating Gender, Narrating the Nation, Allegorical Femininity in Romanian Fiction, Myth and Modernity in the 20th Century Romanian Novel, Staging Stalinism in Post-Communist Romania, avant-gardism, politics, and the limits of interpretation in the eccentric wasteland, reading Gelunov Zenobia, theater in pre- and post-communist Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. She is the author of referred articles and books translations from Romanian fiction and Spanish and Russian theater. She wrote stage adaptation in English and French for performances in Romania, France, and the United States. From Romanian literature, she translated into English Ioan Slavici, Mara, Ciuleandra, Liviu Rebreanu, Haiasanis of Mihai Sadoveanu, Povești de la Hanu Ancuței, Tales from Ancuța's Inn, the Disheveled Maidens of Patricia Papada Bengescu, Concert de Muzică de Bach, The Hidden Way, Velvet Tech, and so many others. Among her theater translations are To Kill a Serpent in the Shell by Boris Akunin, Interrogatorio and Elsinore, English-Romanian bilingual volume by Carlos Manuel Varela, Hamlet, a version of English-Romanian bilingual volume, and so on. She was the recipient of 3 Fulbright Awards and the National Endowment for the Arts Grant for Literary Translation. She holds 2 Meritorious Cultural of Romania distinctions awarded in 2004 and 2018 by the President of Romania, and she serves as an Honorary Consul General of Romania in Arizona from 2010. So she's also a dear friend and colleague of mine from the Consular Corps. Thank you, Professor Orlic, for joining us. Thank you for giving us your time. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. Thank you very much. This was a very generous introduction. I hope I can live up to it. It's a privilege for me to be here today, and I see many faces of longtime friends, as well as new faces. I participated in yesterday's session, and I could see the importance of what was discussed. Session bridges yesterday's conversation with today's. I regret to say that I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. I would like to go over the steps that led to the creation of the Romanian program at Arizona State University. It has been a very long process, and even though I don't think it is a mystery or an enigma for most people, it's some very intricate details which are sometimes overlooked. And the reason for which I would like to rehash them today would be so that there would be the inspiration out there and the blueprint on how such programs could be created at other great universities in the United States. Particularly, there are wonderful academics. I see some who are learning in other important institutions and could easily overcome small threshold and create a full-fledged Romanian studies program. With that introduction, without further ado, let me start the presentation by saying I enjoyed very much the Dean's presentation on communication and the role of technology and how important it is to communicate and how much of us students are. So let me share a quick anecdote that came to mind. So to point, some of you may be old enough to remember Cerbul de Aur in its first editions. You know, it was a festival of music in Brașov, and there were international guests. and we were all glued to these things. Sometimes we went to the neighbors to see the TV. And then there was a young lady who won a prize. Her name was Shaw, and she sang a little song called "The Puppet on a String." And I remember that was one of the first moments when I thought I was going to study English, how beautiful this woman is and all that. Sharing that with you. About 6 years ago, I was in the car driving with a 6-year-old, and I was reminiscing about this particular event, trying to explain I learned English in the hope that the 6-year-old would want to learn Romanian. And I said, you know, there was this song and it was so beautiful, Puppet on the String. Oh, I wish I could remember it, blah, blah, blah. And 2 minutes later in the car, there was the song played out. The 6-year-old, 6 years ago, has identified on YouTube the singer, the song, and she was playing it. She was 6. This was 6 years ago. I was a full professor, and I was absolutely shocked. So this is what we are dealing with today, and this is 6 years later. And by the way, I always thought that I used to say that I would rather drive a school bus than teach online. So guess what? Since March the 16th, 2012, ASU went on Zoom. So I have been teaching all my courses on Zoom. So I do agree with the fact that communication and bridging conversation and experiences is crucial in promoting culture and in promoting Romanian studies, which is the point of my entire presentation. The program at ASU started in a very awkward way in the late 90s. I was a professor of English and comparative literature. I still am. And the idea of creating Romanian studies was very remote to me. We are talking planetary systems. I never thought that that could possibly be done, and that was the late 90s. So when I was pirated from the English department into this school, I didn't know what to do because I'm not trained as a linguist. I'm a comparatist. So my first reaction was to bridge English literature with Romanian literature. And that was a very successful first step, because I could teach, for instance, Chaucer, all right, in the English department, but then talk about Hanuan, where you have a similar template of a country inn, and you have an innkeeper, and you have people who tell their stories. More than that, the innkeeper is not a man, it is a woman, Ancuța, and then she's the new one, not the old one. And so you have the generations, you have these women who are very powerful, who are empowering. And so this was a possibility to communicate to the students what are some of the dimensions of the Romanian space. So all that, I'm talking about Moldova, I'm talking about country inns, and the students' interest is sparked. And then of course there is more. Oh, I say, you are interested in feminism, you are interested in powerful women. Great, no problem. So I bring in Baltagur, or I bring in one of my all-time favorite novels, which is Slavic's Mara, you know, muiere spătoasă care stă la capul podului și vinde pește. So anyway, all of a sudden the students who are graduate students in literature, in English literature, want to know about this particular culture, And so we go to Romania with summer programs, but we also start offering Romanian language courses. And of course, this is the tipping point. So now they can take Romanian. And what I say is, oh, this is a package. You have culture courses, you also have language courses. Therefore, we create a diploma that will, in fact, validate, officialize your academic background. So now we have, you see, an academic degree in Romanian studies that the students find very meaningful because they can use it for the School of Foreign Service, they can use it for whatever international monetary funds. And I do have former students who had positions and jobs in this particular distinguished organizations. And so everybody's talking about what we can do with Romanian. Okay, great. So we are in the early 2000 something. I need more than what I can, which is literature, culture, and language courses. In them, of course, the university hires lecturers, instructors who can teach Romanian and also know a whole lot about Romanian culture. So, but what do I do next? How do I maintain this platform of academic credibility and importance? And at that moment, there is incredible support from support. It came just as the right time, just as the culture academic whatever platform was not weakened, becoming somewhat stale. So we had an incredible guest visiting our program, and that was Sorin Ducaru. He was at that time Romania's ambassador in the United States, and he gave a wonderful talk about the Black Sea. And he presented his views about what the Black Sea is all about and what is happening with Romania in this particular international strategic context. And so the enrollment, just to give you an idea, went from 50 students to 75 students in within a quick presentation time. And there was more than that. We then acquired we also acquired an honorary consulate, which brought the Romanian community into the fold. The Romanian community was already there, but the addition of this bridge with the community that allowed for more engagement and more substantial contributions made an impact. All of a sudden, heritage speakers, children, students from the Romanian community signed up, not for Romanian, but for the degree that we are offering through the program. And so it may not look like the creation of an honorary consulate had much to do with the academic world, but in fact, it was huge. And then at least there was the connectivity with the Institutul Limbii Române, which was very helpful in sending us a lecturer. This is when the consulate in Los Angeles, and I just don't want to mention the people here, but I have to. So whenever things didn't go right, whenever there was miscommunication, time lapses, the consulate was very helpful. So you're going to say, what's that got to do with Romanian studies at ASU? Well, a child with many parents. And so it was very useful to have the support of the consulate to dialogue with the Romanian institutions, because ASU starts classes very early. You know, these are things that are lost in translation. People are disconnected between Romania and, say, Arizona State. They don't realize that for instance, the academic year starts in August. Well, if that's the case, then we need a lecturer to arrive before the October date when universities start in Romania. So now you see how consular offices are extremely important. And I am always very grateful to the Consulate General in Los Angeles for that. Now, that was the second stage of our program, the engagement and the very rewarding collaboration with the Romanian institutions. The third stage, which is where we are today, is very important because we do have the lecture, we do have the honorary consul, we do have the course and the degree, but how do we keep the interest of the students? Let me just share with you this example of the Dracula course. I always had this very healthy resentment of how Dracula is perceived culturally in the United States, especially some of the Hollywood movies, all of that I have never been a fan of. But it seemed the right time to offer a course that will, once again, and I'm coming full circle, will rely on literature. Most of the people who talk about Dracula don't really bother to read Bram Stoker's novel. It is a wonderful novel. It is a wonderful novel, and it talks about the important issue of Christianity. And Christianity may not be the big attraction for the American students, but the fact of the matter is that the cultural paradigm of Europe is Christianity. And so what Bram Stoker does is he inserts that in his novel. It never crosses his mind to talk about vampires only. He's interested in this presence and transmission of Christianity and the cultural elements. So the Dracula course, and I'll stand by that, has an enrollment of more than 200 students. There is no representation of a bloodthirsty vampire. It is an immersion in the cultural space of a Victorian Europe that is rediscovering other territories and appropriating it in a cultural context, of course, is predicated on Christianity. And so this is how the Romanian studies in its third phase hopefully continues to prosper by appropriating all sorts of options. There is a Dracula options, and by the way, I am at work on a history of fanariots because I resent the fact that, and I truly resent that, between Dracula, who is perceived as a bloodthirsty vampire at a time when Țepeș fights to maintain an independent principality, right? And when all the princes of the Balkans, from Serbia, from wherever they may be, Albania and all that, convert to Islam, right? This is a small country, a small space that fights to maintain its culture, its religion. Okay, so there is this gap between Vlad the Impaler and then 1866, Carol al Doilea, Charles II of Romania, the monarchy, as if nothing exists there. A whole lot exists there, a whole lot. So this is another thing I would like to do. I noticed that some of the books that are published, whether they are translations of canonical literature like Papadat Bengescu, the Halipa trilogy, or Mara, or Agopian, Tache de Catifel, right, which brings in Oltenia all of a sudden. It's a paradigm. It's an important space, right? So what I would like to do is work toward a study that brings in the cultural, I'm not a historian, the cultural history of the Romanian space between that completely distorted moment of Vlad the Impaler and the monarchy. Just to show that we existed, and in fact, we played a crucial part between the two empires. And we all know what those are. I mean, it's not that I'm going to teach that now, but it's important that we maintained our cultural identity and also a very controversial identity, because it is not as if we took everything from France. We are Francophone. I'm not sure that works. In fact, from Constantinople, people went to Paris, they came back, then they came back, and then they came to Romania as Panagiots. And again, as in the case of Bram Stoker, I think a lot of people do not read Yorga. They do not read Oțeta. They do not read this wonderful archives that have so much information about what we can do. And really, this has nothing to do with Romanian studies, because American students are very interested in finding out, and I should probably save them, all the notes I got even this semester from a class I teach, which is called Empires and the Creation of Modern Europe. Of course, I use most of my time to talk about Romania, but okay. So the gist of the message is, we know everything about Paris, we know everything about London, and somehow we stop somewhere in Prague, and then there is Russia. But these are courses that are offered in the Romanian Studies at ASU, courses that have catchy titles, Empires and Modern Europe, but really present the very rich and complex history of Central Europe, of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, of the Ottoman Empire, of Tsarist Russia, and primarily the extraordinary story of success, which is today's Romania. So that's the gist of the program. And you, Consul General, mentioned European Studies Certificate. So this is the final leg of what I have been doing. All right, I am putting this aura of interest, and I have received permission, and it is now up and kicking, the European Studies Certificate. So the students will get a European Studies Certificate, which I direct, and I offer a lot of courses in which, of course, they have an opportunity to read Zenobia. If they want to know about André Breton and Nadia, well, they should read Zenobia, and everybody's happy, and they take Romanian, and we are done. So we do have an interest which comes from multiple planes and involves multiple disciplines and cross-listing of courses with political science, religious studies, cultural geography, communication, English, and all those. So I'm working on the School of Global Futures. I have a lot to talk about there when it comes to the Danube Delta, so I'm working on it. I'll be on sabbatical. So thanks to the consulate, maybe I will have more bridges to Romania. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Orlic. It's listening to you and to your presentation is really wonderful. This reminds us all why we all love literature, and why we all love literature professors.
Oh, thank you.
You are giving us such different and beautiful perspective of the world, of history, and you just point out realities that we usually do not see, we do not notice.
You are very kind, Consul General. May I just say one quick thing in the for the benefit and glory of beautiful Romania?
Please.
You know, Thank you. So here's how there is a way of attracting people, and the distinguished speaker before me, the dean, talked about, and I took notes. It was a great presentation. She talked about polarization and about cognitive and emotional polarization and all that, and she's absolutely right. But since we are the descendants of Eliade and Historia Religilor, we know that truth is just out there, and truth is hard to fathom, and it depends on so many options. And in relation to that, let me bring the idea of political correctness. Okay, so colonization, such a bad thing. Oh, bash on England, colonizing the world, blah, blah, blah. Now, who is bashing? Usually the people who have a lot to gain. They have to be speakers of the same language, English, because if those markets are decolonized, then you can go into the countries that speak English and you become the new colonial power. So again, the issue of colonization and the issue of fairness and the issue of how exploited other people are, and so, all of that. I don't know about that. We can explain things in terms of language. English is a powerful language. So you move from colonial England to the idea of markets where English is still prevalent. So therefore, what we are looking at is the importance of language. And the reason why, if you ask me on any given day, the fall of the Berlin Wall was made possible by the Beatles. We all learned English. It was all over. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. I have to say that. It's important.
Yes, thank you for saying that. And thank you for bringing in our conversation the name of Professor Mircea Eliade, another Romanian professor, very loved at the University of Chicago, and remembered by many of his former students, and that now are amazing specialists in the history of religion here in the United States. Thank you for bringing the name in your presentation, bringing the name of Hortensia Babada Bengescu. We are talking about women empowerment and feminism, and usually we think about Virginia Woolf when you bring that into discussion. And Hortensia Babada Bengescu, we all know that she was way before Virginia Woolf, and her writings are really, really amazing. And thank you for translating those novels and for making them available for the American public. That's important for understanding better the Romanian culture and for filling that gap that we're talking about in the Central and Eastern Europe, beyond the limits of Prague. People should know about that. And that's why I love listening to literature professor, the finest art in the world, literature. And thank you, Professor Orlich, for everything you're doing there at the Arizona State University. You are a model for how the academic cultural dimension of the Romanian-American partnership, strategic partnership, is built and consolidated.
Thank you.
That's a model for all of us, and thank you for what you're doing there. And because you are talking about a special kind of aura when you talk about the Romanian culture, that gives me the perfect reason for bringing and inviting into our conversation Professor Ora Imbarus. She is the next panelist. So practically Ora is going to come and to give us a presentation about mindset and mindfulness as a tool for the 21st century education. I think that the topic is going to complete in a very intelligent way the presentation of Professor Bargăuanu. But first of all, allow me please to make a short presentation of Ora's Professor Imbarus' career. And I will start by sharing my screen and telling you that Dr. Ora Imbarus is an awarded educator, freelance journalist, motivational speaker and author of the critically acclaimed Amazon bestseller and Pulitzer Prize entry, Out of the Transylvania Night, a story of tyranny, freedom, love, and identity, a memoir detailing her life in Romania during the communist regime, and the self-help book, reader's favorite and 2020 Best Book Award finalist, Conversation with the Past. She's also the president and founder of the See Beyond Media, a company focusing on adolescents' challenges in the 21st century, having as its launching platform See Beyond Magazine and See Beyond the Hill, a women's empowerment conference highlighting local female entrepreneurs while giving back to the community through the Young Female Leaders Fund. See Beyond Media also offers life coaching, author coaching, branding, and media services. Dr. Imbarus has a Bachelor of Arts in Foreign Languages, Master's in a degree in American and British Studies, and a PhD degree with cum laude in World Humanities from Lucian Blaga University in Romania. She has got a lot of certificates with a lot of acronyms from UCLA and California State University. Since 1998, she has been teaching high school and college level classes in Southern California. Dr. Imbarus is a licensed clinical hypnotherapist, having trained with Dr. Brian Weiss and Dr. Juanita Holmes. She was featured on NBC, ABC, CNBC, Good Morning San Diego, Forbes Romania, etc. Dr. Aura Imbarus is a member of Royal Society of St. George, Romanian-American Chamber of Commerce, Los Angeles, Swiss American Chamber of Commerce. She sat on the board of the Wesley Foundation, UCLA, and supported and mentored children for Blue Heron Foundation. She writes for the Global Woman magazine in London, Palos Verdes Pulse, Elephant Journal, Beverly Hills Time magazine, The Immigrant, Hermannstadter Zeitung in Transylvania, and also works for a freelance journalist as a freelance journalist for Entertainment and Sports Today. In her free time, she likes to go dancing, hiking, skiing, yoga, gym, sailing, and she loves traveling. Dr. Imbarus, when do you find the time to go hiking?
Well, thanks so much.
During the day. Congratulations. I'm really, really impressed. I'm looking forward to your presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And I really believe that all of us who are here, we share the same love and drive for life experiences. And that's why we're constantly growing, from one day to another. It so happens that I've met Ileana pretty much like probably 11 years ago when she was so kind and invited me to present Out of the Transylvania Night at Arizona State University. So what an honor right now to see her once again. So thank you, Ileana, and to many more encounters like that. Well, we all talked about communication and critical thinking. And before I start my slide presentation here, I really believe that, like Mark Twain said, everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. So with that being said, for 20 years, I've been teaching advanced critical thinking at the college level. And there has been a shift, a mindset shift. And I would say probably that has happened around 2013 or so, when before going to my classes, I would be like talking about rhetorics. I would be infusing my lectures with Faulkner or Hemingway. But all of a sudden, I would start my class doing a pep talk presentation. It's like motivating them. It's trying to engage them in Socratic seminars, trying to make them be present, and not physically present, but actually mentally present in my classes. And we all know, like in an hour, we pretty much adults too, we pay attention the very first 10 minutes of a conference and the last 10 minutes. the first 10 minutes because we kind of like see exactly what's going to happen, and the last 10 minutes because we would have to say goodbye to everybody, right? So the mindset has been the issue that really, really got my attention, especially when we're thinking about all the tools that we are using, such as iPhone, iPad, iTunes. The problem is it's in each and every one of them. The issue is, who is this I? How would you define yourself in all these I products? And that's pretty much what got me into 2014 to really think, and with the help of my students, create this motivational magazine called See Beyond, where they are really talking about their life stories and how they've accomplished, they went on the other side of the hill, becoming actually successful. So people always say that motivation doesn't last, right? Zig Ziglar said that motivation doesn't last, but neither does bathing. And that's why we recommend it daily. So let's start my PowerPoint presentation, and then feel free to stop me and literally ask me questions. Or I think that the Consul General of Romania, thank you so much for having me here today. Feel free to stop me, or any questions that you might have probably are going to be given when everybody has presented, I'm guessing, right?
The Q&A session will be at the end of the presentations, Dr. Imbarus.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So let's get going here. Okay, I guess you can see it, correct? Am I?
Yes, you can proceed. We can see it.
Perfect. Okay. So unfortunately, this is not even, during COVID, but, just because we've all gone through COVID and we know exactly what's happening, according to this employment site Monster, nearly half of, last year's class, it's still looking for work. And then 85% of the new grads, they still say their career goals have been set back by a month or more. And 29% expect a delay of over 6 months. Now, the issue that pretty much I would love to bring up, it's the fact that another 66% of these grads are not very optimistic. So I look to see exactly how inefficient probably the search for jobs it's happening. And if you are really looking actually at desperation, which unfortunately it's a word that we hear, more often than we should, the Gen Z, they really said that desperation drove them more than 3/4 of grads, right? 73% to actually get jobs that didn't fit their career goals. And the non-college Gen Z, 63% of them embrace jobs that they didn't even think they were qualified for. Now, on top of that, according to, the American College Health Association, and they have conducted this, survey in 2018 based on the previous year, 2017. So 63% of college students in the US, and this is 2017, right, felt anxious in that year. And more than that, 23% of them have been diagnosed or treated by a mental health professional for anxiety in the past year. So now, whenever I'm teaching, whenever I'm lecturing to my students, I have felt that depression and anxiety are the ones that are blocking my students from really fulfilling their whole potential. Whenever they are depressed, students are always going to live in the past. And whenever they are anxious, students actually are living in the future. So between the past and the future, my students are really never in the present moment. And that's where pretty much the mindset of being in the present moment, that's where miracles are going to happen. In the present moment, I might be able to go down the memory lane and scoop up some amazing memories, but in general, I cannot change my past. I can only change my mindset. So I've been a huge fan of Steve Jobs. So he said, the ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Well, it's about thinking, right? So before I go with the next presentation that actually Steve Jobs is narrating this commercial, let's talk a little bit about Steve Jobs and his mentality, right? So at the age of 21, he co-founded Apple. At the age of 23, he was already a millionaire. Well, that changed because when he was 30 years old, he was fired from his own company because the board of directors decided with somebody else that it so happened that Steve Jobs hired him. The board of directors decided to go with his ideas. And sure enough, Steve Jobs is going to be unemployed, pretty much fired by his own company. Well, you can have the mindset, okay, I am a failure. This is it. This is all I've done. And hopefully people will remember me. Or, that failure can actually propel you to embrace new things. And so in 1985, he's going to actually phone a colleague, and together they started Next, which later on is going to be bought out by Apple. And then Pixar Animation Studios, which we already know was bought out by Disney. So the mindset is the one that is going to really give us the tools to be successful in life. The problem is that, I'm going to show you that. So let me just show you this particular video.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
So I really believe that thinking differently, it's very, very important. What has happening, like if we are looking at, let's say, a 4 years old and a 40 years old, the way we approach life, as an example, let's say you are at Starbucks, right? And so the stranger is going to approach a 4 years old. The 4 years old probably is going to start laughing, right? And it's going to be very friendly. Now, if this stranger is going to approach a woman, probably whatever is going to go through my mind, oh my God, look at this weirdo, right? Why is he smiling? Why is he approaching me? So what has happened? I mean, the mindset has changed. As children, we were open to a universe full of potential. As adults, we have created experiences that some of them maybe were successful while others weren't. And so now we have become jaded and we are dragging from our past the blueprint of our failures. So very many times I am recommending this particular GPS, which I call it the mindset GPS, whenever students are coming to my classes. And GPS was coined, right, by the psychologist Carol Dweck, and this growth mindset and we should all have it because it's innate, it's in us. I mean, it's that person's belief that skills and abilities can develop, and especially through hard work and, you know, challenging times, we can still become successful. Just because you failed once, that can be considered, let's say, a chapter of a book. But the book of life, it's not done yet. So one of the books that I absolutely love, and I really, really highly recommend it to my students whenever we do advanced critical thinking, is A Man's Search for Meaning, realizing the P that stands for purpose. And I always say to my students, write your purpose in pen, but your path in pencil. As long as you really, really know what you want, how you're going to get there, don't be stuck on how. Because, you know, life is going to throw at you very many different routes, even if all roads take us to Rome. But, you know, maybe the one you had in mind is not necessarily the one that you will embrace. And that's why Nietzsche's quote, you know, it's something also that it's really reflecting that mindset. He who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how. And so when we're looking at the way students are embracing their education, 62% of students who began seeking a bachelor degree at a 4-year institution did not really fall behind because they, you know, all of a sudden the curriculum was too hard. No, it was the mindset that I could not do it. I cannot finish it in 4 years. And so, of course, they graduated in 6 years. But we see that at all levels. We're all exposed to circumstances. And so the way we're exposed to them is going to create a certain thought that pretty much is going to transfer into a certain feeling. And that's going to determine a certain action that is going to have a certain result. So I always say to my students, whatever pretty much you say to yourself, and that's communication. You know, we all have communications with others, but I think the most important communication is with yourself. What do you say to yourself on a daily basis? You wake up in the morning and, okay, it's gloomy. I'm going to say, oh my God, I'm going to have a horrible day. And so now you're setting yourself for that horrible day, or I'm going to have an amazing day. So the fact that we enunciate words, positive words, can create a blueprint that can actually trigger positive responses. I mean, think of your blender in the morning. If you're going to put bananas, there is no way you're going to get strawberries, you know, a strawberry smoothie, right? So pretty much whatever you're going to put into your blender, that's exactly what you're going to get out. So, you know, per day, we have around 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts, out of which 93% of them are negative. And around 94% of them are actually the same thoughts we had yesterday and the week before. And if out of that percentage, 93% of them are negative, how in the world can you create something that is positive if you're constantly thinking like you did yesterday? And obviously yesterday probably was not a very successful one, right? And that's kind of like taking me to what we call a paradigm shift, but also neuroplasticity. I don't want to bore you with anything medical here, but really the neurons that fire together, wire together. And so now the medical field already knows this, that neuroplasticity, it's the phenomenon in brain where different stimuli led to increase or decrease in the number of brain cells and remodeling of synapses. So if I'm going to say to myself on Monday morning, oh, I'm so dumb, how could I not get this? On Tuesday, how in the world I'm going to do this? I don't have the knowledge, I'm dumb. On Wednesday, you know what? This is really dumb. Why should I do it? On Thursday, the same thing. On Friday. Well, all of a sudden, whatever you've been saying to yourself, those neurons are going to start wiring together. So even if you are super bright, even if you have a high IQ, by the end of the week, you're going to feel very dumb, because this is what you've been telling yourself in all these days. Now multiply this by weeks, multiply this by months, and then all of a sudden you are going to have these super bright students who unfortunately have the mindset that they are not capable of doing things. I call this the I+1. The I, it's their level. The +1, it's me when I'm coming in and I'm going to say, okay, this is how much you've done on your own. And I highly suggest, like literally the dean already knows that I brought books into my curriculum that they are nonfiction, and probably they're not necessarily part of the narrative, that we've all been exposed to. I highly recommend The Biology of Belief. He is a former professor at Harvard University. And after he self-published The Biology of Belief, it so happened that in a year, that particular book sold 500,000 copies. And then it was actually, picked up by Hay House, which is a local Californian publishing company, probably one of the best in the world. And then Dr. Wayne Dyer, I trained with both of them. I trained with Bruce Lipton. I trained with Dr. Wayne Dyer. Dr. Wayne Dyer was called the father of motivation, but he was a psychologist and a college professor. So whenever I think of wishes fulfilled, I always tell my students, if you are going to go and embrace the work field, or if you're going to go and prepare yourself for your master's program or PhD program, a lot of your road is going to be consumed by negative thoughts. I have no clue how I'm going to get there because it's going to be stressful. I have no clue if I have the money. And I said, well, how about this? Thinking from the end, wishes fulfilled. Just say to yourself that you're already there, that you have achieved whatever you wanted to achieve. You already got your master's program. You already got your PhD program. You already got that job that you so wanted. Now your thinking process is going to shift. Your mindset is going to be different. Now you have to plan backwards. Why? Because you're already there. And so that's kind of like transitioning to the mindfulness. Now, if we're really, really looking at, stress and anxiety, and unfortunately, professors and students, we all deal with that. And stress is really the leading cause of illnesses, and it's costing the US economy $300 billion per year. Because people are ditching, because they are not there, because, it's a diminished productivity, and of course, the increase in medical costs. So I kind of like listed some universities that I've been following around for what it's called the mindset and mindfulness. And so what do this university have in common? Oxford, Brown University, Harvard, UC San Diego. They literally have courses, mindfulness education, where the lessons on techniques to calm the mind and the body, they can reduce the negative effects of stress. And of course, like we said, it's increasing students' ability to stay engaged and, on track academically and also in their personal lives. So all these universities have embraced these programs. Actually, the last one, it's UC San Diego, and they have done amazing programs with the ones that are actually registered, for this mindfulness educational courses. And so then why mindfulness? You have to create a certain mindset that you are way more powerful than others have told you, that you are way more powerful than you've been telling yourself. But then how about mindfulness? And the moment, I many times in my classes, people are coming, and we know that the brain works in beta waves. We want to do 10,000 different things at the same time, and so we are hyper. I have to tend to this, I have done this. We have so many things on our minds. But when my students are coming to my classes, I'm like, okay, so let's pause. Let's hit the reset button. Let's take your mind from the beta waves to alpha waves. And then let's go to that relaxation mode where it's theta waves, where, it's hypnosis, right? Where all of a sudden your mind is going to be relaxed. Let's not think about how you're going to graduate. Let's not think about the grade you're going to be receiving in this class. Just be in this moment. And I try to really connect with them. We do exercises where they ground themselves in my class before I start, my preaching, my lectures, right? And so I always say, try to get to know yourself. But, in my classes, like, try to get to know yourself in this moment. Just tell me, how do you feel? Like, honestly. And so they write it down. It's like, define yourself in one single word. And they're like, tired or uninspired or, depressed or anxious. Well, I cannot change something I'm not aware of. And whatever I have there, I have to embrace it. Somebody that has been drinking, 3 glasses of wine might not have a problem because he doesn't think that, drinking more than 1 or 2 glasses is a problem. An alcoholic will not go and to the AA program if he is not going to realize that actually he has a problem. And so our problem with this generation is that we are bombarded by so much information. We have the Instagram, we have the Facebook, we have the Snapchat, and I really, really have to follow all of them. But how many times can we really be aware of this moment? All the other moments, are going to come when time is there. But how about bringing the awareness that I'm going to move from, a habit, from my subconscious mind, which is, actually, 95, 97% of all of my actions. And I'm going to be consciously breathing, consciously thinking about how am I going to make the change? And the only time you're going to make the change, it's now, in this present moment. And I always tell my students, act calm, cool, collected. I mean, because those are the keys, to increase performance and resilience in modern times. And then the term relaxation response, was coined by a professor at Harvard University, Dr. Herbert Benson, and he really talks about this relaxation response methods. And so whenever we are going to embrace this, it's pretty much the helpful way to turn off the fight or flight response. So your cortisol is not going to go up anymore, right? And it's going to bring your body back to the pre-level stresses. And so, as I said, I do this in my classes, like breathing techniques and energy healing and progressive muscle relaxation and visualization and meditation. And very many times it's like, okay, we take 5 minutes to recenter ourselves. I mean, this is not some sort of a, marathon. It's like, okay, we know where to get, we know what the final destination is, but let's just take a moment now and be present and, just really feel this moment. And however you feel, whatever you feel, it's yours to embrace. And we're coming to the end of my presentation. And as we all talked about communication, right? The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. George Bernard Shaw. So hopefully, with that kind of an illusion, we are going to move on and learn something and probably be grounded in the moment and really believe in ourselves, because all things are happening if we're really grounded in this moment. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Consul General of Romania, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Imbarush. We cannot applaud. It's really amazing how you showed us a whole different perspective of education, or a segment of this process that many times is overlooked, and that many times affects in a very negative way, overlooking that aspect, the quality of the process of education and the efficiency of communication. You gave us a whole different concept of the GPS. It's not a global positioning system. It's growth, it's purpose, it's a social environment and social skill. And that, of course, is something to think about a lot. And I'm really sure that your presentation and the content of the thoughts that you shared with us today is going to be very well connected to the presentation of Professor Radu Koșarcă. I'm not knowing very much about the content of his presentation, but I have a suspicion about it.
Me too.
Because he's going to tell us from the perspective of the industry how the education of new graduates and new generations are affected by old school or by the need for a new school. But let's leave that to Professor Koșarcă. And now we are climbing up a bit on the map, and we go to the beautiful Seattle, beautiful and a little bit rainy, but still beautiful. And we have the pleasure of having with us Professor Otilia Baraboy. Professor Baraboy is going to talk about advocacy of strategic partnership and communication. And as we are celebrating the Romanian-American strategic partnership, I think that this kind of presentation is perfectly fit to our conference. So before everything, so let me introduce to you Professor Baraboy. Dr. Otilia Baraboy is an affiliate lecturer to the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at the University of Washington in Seattle. She is the executive director and co-founder of the American-Romanian Cultural Society, the manager of the Romanian Film Festival in Seattle, and the coordinator of the Romanian School in Washington State. Since 2013, when ARCS was founded, Dr. Baraboy has coordinated over 80 cultural events, exhibitions, book launches, shows, film screenings, educational workshops, and so on, that have given a national and international visibility to the mission of the organization she leads. Dr. Baraboy is also the vice president of the Ethnic Heritage Council of the Pacific Northwest, where she works with Washington State institutions to promote the linguistic and ethnic diversity of the region in a global context. Before settling in the USA in 2000, Dr. Baraboy published prose, articles, and translations in anthologies and literary magazines in Romania and Austria. She was awarded the Grand National Prize, Stories from Vojdeuca, and worked as a journalist at Radio Iași. In addition to her literary and journalistic activity, she volunteered at the orphanage of Hălăucești, an experience that strengthened her conviction that the development of the civic sector is vital for the regeneration of the Romanian post-communist society. After graduating with a degree in French literature in Iași University, Dr. Baraboy did 2 masters in literature and aesthetics at the University of Washington and University of Geneva, followed by a doctorate in theory of translation. Since 2001, she has taught writing, film, French language and literature, and more recently, a class of Romanian literature, art, and film at the University of Washington. She has participated in numerous national and international conferences and published articles on post-colonialism, film, diaspora, and translation in magazines in Romania and the USA. Throughout her academic career, she has always cultivated the necessary connection between the arts and civic activism. Congratulations, Dr. Baraboy. Thank you for taking our invitation and for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting us. I am very happy to be followed by my colleague, Ileana Marin, who will complement what I have to say about our programs and outreach in the academia and outside the campus. I will try to share my screen. Okay. So the title of my presentation today is Advocacy, Strategic Partnerships and Communications, and I will focus on our educational programs. The objectives will be to present an integrative model of advocacy, local and national collaborations and communication between the academic and the out-of-campus communities. I will say I won't present our heritage language programs in detail. What I would like to mention is that they are powered by a common drive that is to enhance the visibility of our community, not only locally, but also nationally and internationally. It is the programs we have are guided by the principles of the heritage language acquisition, and I will talk a little bit more about it. And they are the curriculum, and the curricula is designed by a team motivated to empower the second generation of Romanian Americans, and also to think of the legacy that the Romanian American community will leave after we're gone for the future generations, because as we all know, Romania has never been confronted with such a huge and impactful diasporic moment and movement, and we are responsible today, you know, as first generations of what will happen after us, how our programs and advocacy and accountability will impact the second generation of Romanian Americans. So we do have this mission at heart with every programs that we design, and we have programs that are destined for kids ages 4 even, and we go as far as the university level, and my colleague will talk about that, and beyond that. Our programs address non-heritage students as well, mainly heritage students. And I will develop a little bit more on the importance of strategic partnerships. This is a program that was born out of the pandemic, another silver lining of the pandemic, the fact that we are in a virtual format. So many collaborations were taking place at this time because of the space and time restrictions are so much looser than before. And this is a program that is unique. This is sponsored by Washington State Department of Education. It has not only Romanian heritage students, but also Russian heritage students and Spanish heritage students. And it brings together several organizations that are quite impactful locally, besides Washington State Department of Education. And I want to mention World Affairs Council that has offices all over the states, actually, not only in Seattle, also the Ethnic Heritage Council, and of course our organization and other nonprofits that I won't mention now. I will talk a little bit more about this program. Right now, I just want to mention another important program that we have, that it's this year in its 5th edition, the Romanian-American National Heritage Award. Again, like I said, we try to address every age group. And this is for not only for high school students, but also for students who are in college or even finished college and still distinguish themselves through their impactful volunteering activities in their communities. And here you have an example of a diploma. We have several levels. It's a national award, and applications will open soon. I hope you will encourage your communities to participate. Here we have last year's recipients from Oregon State, Stefan Gabriel Ene. You see that we amplify their work even after they got the award. We have, through our social media and newsletters, here's what Stefan Gabrielene had to say. He was one of the main drivers of a very interesting program that they have in Sinaia. They teach coding to high school students in Sinaia. And Stefan here said, I found volunteering to be essential in connecting and opening new horizons for people that I value both in the US and Romania. And because these students are so articulated and they represent the future, and the fact that they are true influencers and connectors between our world here, the diaspora, and our homes in Romania, we promote their accomplishments and also what they say about their vision in this world. So we amplify their power, we empower them, and this is very important when we think about heritage education that is based on students' needs and empowerment. And Nicole Sandu here, she's from Chicago. She leads a book club for Romanian heritage students. And you can see that the diploma was signed virtually by His Excellency, the Ambassador George Meyer, a representative from ARCS, and James Rosa Pepe, the board chair of our main partner, Alianza, that is based in Washington, D.C., that is more of an umbrella organization. What is interesting is that there is a ceremony where the recipients of these awards coming from all over the states go in Washington, D.C. Last year, we could not have it. We had we handed them the diplomas, but we did not meet in person. This year, Alianza will hold the gala, I think, in November. So here you see recipients from 2017, the awards, Alianza Awards Gala. And here you see this was the last edition that took place in person. It is very important at this gala, as many of you might have been there. It's an event that brings together professionals, but also representatives of our communities. And it's been an event that was crucial in fostering dialogue between several organizations, Romanian-American organizations, and I will talk more about the fruitful dialogue that took place at Alianza Galas over time.
Professor Bara, Could you please widen the screen, just make the slideshow out of the presentation?
Yes,
Thank
sure.
you.
All right. And I think the first presenter talked about the importance of education in creating the new citizen of the world, a social that will have will be an agent of social consensus and change. And this is what we're trying to do, being a nonprofit. So this is an educational program with a mission, right? The mission of our nonprofit is to create change, social change, and also to ensure the empowerment of our future generations. And I have here just a short definition of what advocacy is. So it is an action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends or pleads on behalf of others. The role of advocacy is to educate. So where if we see that the community doesn't see the advantages of sending their the second generation to our programs, or sending, even it has been quite hard to convince the community to apply, to send their applications for the Romanian-American National Award. There is still, I think we need to build trust, and we've talked about it. We need to build trust that there is fairness involved in the process, and that there is the main mission that we all have is to enhance the cohesion of the Romanian-American community nationally and as a diaspora, Romanian diaspora at large. What we do through, and it's still advocacy work, is to evaluate the needs and respond to them within our communities, not only locally, but also nationally. Again, because as I told you, the silver lining of the pandemic has been that there has been a lot of opportunities of dialogue. And even we hope that in September, we will be able to launch FORA, a federation of Romanian-American organizations that will speak in unison about our needs with the home country, but also with the American government and all the federal institutions that can fund our programs and help us be united and stronger. For again, let's not forget, we're doing everything for the empowerment of the second generation of Romanian Americans. Again, another important aspect of advocacy is collaboration. And that's why I said that advocacy goes together with partnerships and communication, cross-cultural communications, but also transgenerational communication. And I think our programs have been quite successful in doing that. A particularity of heritage and bilingual education is to be the fact that it is informed by what's happening in our communities. It is informed by what's happening at the family level, so in the private sector, but also in the public sector by the work that our communities do. So that's why the methodology used, and I will give you some example, is project-based learning. It involves parents, students, communities, and cultural institutions in the learning process. So it is not a simple, it's not like taking French, so it's not like second language acquisition where you have a textbook and you teach from the textbook. You need to mobilize a whole community around the classroom and inform the classroom with the events that you put together with the help of the community or with the help of other communities in the US. It is by excellency, it is an advocacy, it is conducing to advocacy because community-based schools like ours bring awareness to state officials that there is a need to shake a little bit the foundation, entrenched US monolingualism, like we see. Because as you know, the study of foreign languages is not encouraged. We are very lucky to live in Washington State, where there is a dual language program and where our children can get credits, if they pass the ALTA exam, can get 4 credits in high school for their heritage language. But there is no other program like ours in the other states. So I think, again, our mission is to talk about the rights that we have as minorities. As you might know, that more than 20%, about 23% of households in America are bilingual or multilingual. The US government needs to address this at the federal level, and that's why we need to do advocacy work to talk about our needs and ask them to invest in heritage language education. And I think we have been successful, because this is the first year when we get such a grant through the Department of Washington State Education. Another venue where you can advocate for heritage language education is the Coalition of Community-Based Heritage Language Schools. And they have a directory. And if you have the time, I think we will probably share the slides. Go look at the directory. You will see about 30 community language Bulgarian schools, and only one Romanian language school, which is ours. This is really alarming. And we've been talking about it every time we had the occasion to do so. Under our guidance, we have another community-based school that just opened in Connecticut this spring, and we hope there will be many others who will open in order to address the needs of the second generation holistically, since they are like early on, to encourage bilingualism and the preservation of their heritage language, and also in high school and in college. The principles that guide and inform our methodology have been studied and condoned by the National Heritage Language Resource Center at the University of Washington. We have an annual conference on heritage language education led by our board member Michelle Aoki. So there are many opportunities, and we are more than happy to share them with you. Just to give you an idea there, we need to distinguish between what is a heritage speaker. The second generation of Romanian Americans, arguably they're not native speakers. They have different needs that we need to address. And also, I think in order, when we want to collaborate with institutions from Romania, they need to understand the distinction. The fact that textbooks that are developed in Romania do not work for the second generation of Romanian Americans have been, I know it's a fact, it has been puzzling, but it is a reality. Heritage language speakers grew up in families where language other than English was spoken, so they are heavily influenced by the dominant language, which is in our case English. This can be the case. We can take this definition and apply it to other diasporas in Spain, in Italy, wherever in Europe. Their heritage language is typically the weaker language, right, of the two, but they do have strengths. If you think about it, they have functional skills. They can do a lot with the language. They can communicate in everyday circumstances. They have the vocabulary to do that. They have a near native perception, and sometimes the pronunciation is quite close to the native pronunciation. Then their needs are centered around formal academic registers. If you take a heritage student, the most brilliant, let's say, from our program, they will need extensive training to be able to function, let's say, at the university level in Romania, of course. So this is why our programs give them the tool to reach this formal academic register and facility of communication. And I won't enter in details of some aspects of grammar. Of course, their influence, the fact that there is no gender in English will influence the mistakes, the common mistakes, the small facts of language, what we call articles and agreements in Romanian. But I would say that the most common need that these heritage speakers have is the building, articulating, understanding who they are. Their identity narrative needs to be clear for them and also for their parents, because many a times their parents try to communicate them a nostalgic view of their homes. It's just normal, right? They left. There is a rupture there that can be transmitted, not even though beyond words. Your children will see, will sense what is going on. The fact that we are uprooted, that we are a diasporic community. We are not in Romania. So there is this rupture and the need to create a bridge. We need to help them navigate this rupture in their private, lives and also publicly. They need to be able to, we need to give them the tools to articulate and to empower them. Because actually what happens, although we've seen in many communities that parents tend to choose a rather radical action and not speak Romanian to their kids. And by the time the kids are teenagers and want to speak Romanian because they realize it's an asset, it's too late. So there is a need again for advocacy and to educate the families themselves not to give up on them, actually to continue to speak Romanian and to look for programs that do that. These are just the main, principles of heritage education. It is to expand functional proficiency and to design a curriculum that has their needs and motivations in mind. And don't forget that, like I said, there are the identity needs and affect, emotional needs are the most important ones. So we start with the learner. And how you do this, how we have been doing this with our programs, we know the parents, we get to know, the community and the parents individually as well as the learners. Go differentiate as much as possible. Speak the language of your students. Do not, don't be traditional, don't be conservative. Use technology as much as possible. And we have an ARC summer camp where they learn how to film, to make a film, and how to do editing, and how we even had an offer of VR to explore their identity through VR. So do not shy away from new technologies. Another important thing, establish partnerships with institutions that are already doing this work. And have the bigger picture in mind. Heritage education means global education. We are not only educating Romanian Americans, we are educating the future ambassadors of the planet, actually, because they are by birth, actually, they are bilingual. They have a comprehension of the world that is rounded and open-minded, and we need to capitalize on this and give them the tools to understand how powerful this is, and it will be in their careers. I won't insist on what project-based learning is. You can ask questions after this, but again, it is very important that when students create a project, let's say like a film, a video of where they explore their identity, they need to communicate the results, the product, to the entire community. So that's why we have the Romanian Film Festival, where they present the films that they made at the Romanian Film Festival. We have a section for them. Or we have this program that is funded by Washington State in collaboration with World Affairs Council and Global Classroom, that gives the students a global competence certificate based on a portfolio, a website, a personal website, where they address their identity in a global context, global citizens. And here you have an example of the pictures of the two instructors from Romania. Again, the art summer camps take place in collaboration with Control N from Romania, and also they take place at the University of Washington. Again, an example of strategic partnership, because they offer us the space to do so. And I will go faster. Here you have, just to give you an example of the amplitude of the program and what that the resources that it needs to in order to take place. We have about 20 students. Here you have an intern that was funded by UiPath Foundation. So we have strategic partnerships with Romania, not only with Control N, but also with UiPath Foundation that paid for Part, who is also a representative of the Roma community in that, and there was a film made after his life by Alexander Nanau, Toto and his sisters. So the students can see parts of that film, or the parents at the Romanian Film Festival. So again, we always have in mind the overarching, the network, the system of roots that connect our education programs with our cultural programs and with our advocacy work. What's important is the first strategy is, again, like I said, to go where your community is, get to know them. And here we have screenings of the films that the kids made at the local church. It was like we had a big party and we celebrated. And then we had the premiere of their films at the Seattle International Film Festival. Another important thing that where we created what we call a culture of shared affect or emotions, right? And that creates the cohesion and it solidifies the community. We invited a young Romanian-American, Teodora Totoiu, who is actually from LA and who moved to Seattle to present her film about a topic, again, that explores her identity. It is about how a young character goes back to Romania to her grandmother, and there is a problem of communication, a transgenerational communication. First of all, because there is no, the character does not know Romanian that well. So you can imagine the impact bringing together Teodora, who is who graduated quite from film school, and the younger generation together. You can imagine that there was a very powerful moment in the room where parents were actually asking Teodora questions. They were even so emotional about realizing how important we are, how important it is to plant the seeds and to help our younger generation to understand where they are and why it is so important to connect to the roots, to go back to our grandparents and connect the roots, because we do not have an expanded family here. Another important strategy is to use local resources and partners, and we are very much, you are so lucky to be in the vicinity of Maryhill Museum of Art. We, with our students, we take field trips at the museum, and you can see here furniture donated by Queen Marie of Romania that inaugurated the museum in 1926. Again, it is a meaningful, powerful moment of learning and of sparking a moment of pride, right, in who we are, the fact that we do belong here through the local institutions that recognize us, but also we have a powerful and rich history back home. Another strategy has been to generate through our events and encourage our students to write about our events, attend our events and encourage them to write about events that they study in school. And in order, because there has been such a big turmoil, right, with advocacy work in the minority rights and Black Lives Matter, we had events in collaboration with another Romanian-American organization, Archer, in Chicago, where we have experts that talked about minority rights in Romania within a global context. And the students, again, we spoke the students to their interests, and we brought the Romanian context to an issue that was addressed, that is addressed in the American sphere, right, and in their programs at school. Another issue that is of global interest is Earth Day, right? So climate change. So minority rights, climate change. We had an event with Ioana Cosmuța and Luminița Cuna, who are both explorers. Ioana Cosmuța explores the space, and Luminița Cuna the Amazonian jungle. And again, it was very powerful. The students enrolled in our program of Global Competence Certificate attended the event and will probably write about it in their portfolios. Again, just to wrap up, why do we use project-based learning in heritage language education? Again, because it is the best example of advocacy, because for access, in order to offer access to heritage education. It is centered, student-based and student-centered. It empowers our future leaders. Together, we create meaningful, engagable, and accessible content. They are active. We make them autonomous learners. We guide them. We create the events for them, and we give them the tools to articulate who they are as citizens, not only American Romanian citizens, but citizens of the world. And what's important, again, is it brings value to their private lives, and it blurs the divide. There is a divide, like we said, between the private and the public spheres that they have troubles understanding, actually, and navigating. Just to wrap up, so heritage language instruction is and should be, as it is in our programs, task-based, project-based, content-based, and community-based. And this is our latest program. It is, like I said, a pilot program that brings together 3 communities, the more powerful communities that have been receiving funds, like the Spanish and the Russian communities, because there are they're former colonial languages. Romanian is what we call a small language, right? That is spoken only by in Romanian territories and in the diaspora. But if we create strategic partnerships, we can amplify our voice and visibility. This is our team, and I won't go. You can recognize my colleague here, Ileana, and Ileana will talk about our programs at the college level. The Global Competence Certificate is offered by World Affairs Council in Seattle. And they prepare a portfolio, which is a website, actually, where they reflect on their role as global citizens and also on their role as bilingual and multilingual even citizens. And they can also get a complete world language competency-based credit in order to test and learn the global seal of biliteracy. There is another important, let's say, official recognition that they are bilingual citizens, and they can use this later on in their careers. Just to give you an example of what this portfolio includes, based on the principle of global education. So the participants write about them as Romanian Americans, also in Romanian and in English. They talk about their global learning experiences, and we provide them with events, but they also there's a lot of material that we explored in class, presentations, interviews, international experiences and engagement, and also they reflect on what it means to be bilingual and how they navigate between English and Romanian, and what are their needs and strengths. So I won't linger much on. I don't think I have much time, but these are the principles of global competence. So first, we investigate the world, recognize perspectives and goals, communicate ideas, and take action. And taking action can simply mean volunteer. And again, so we feed our other program, the Romanian-American Heritage Award. And also take active, participate in your community events. Another important aspect, and we are so happy, yesterday we had the ceremony for the World Affairs Council essay contest, where one of our students received the 3rd prize, where she wrote about the pandemic. From her perspective as being Romanian-American, we studied the UN Sustainable Development Goals, again, to bring awareness of what's going on, not only in our Romanian-American community, but in the world at large. And I would like to finish with this, because our logo is arcs, and you can see there's many, circles and bridges forming. These are our partnerships at the local level, in education with the University of Washington, Washington State Department of Education, World Affairs Council. In film, we work with Northwest Film Forum, Seattle International Film Festival, for the Romanian Film Festival. In culture and arts, University of Washington libraries, we have a book club that is not only Romanian, but also Eastern European, Earshot Jazz, galleries, art galleries, Bulgarian Heritage Council, and also Ethnic Heritage Council. And in our advocacy work, I think it's very important to get to talk to our communities of how important it is to go there and talk about your needs, because nobody will know, no one will know your needs if you do not voice them out and if you do not partner with those who have experience in this. So that's why we partnered with Seattle Unite and Friends of the Bellevue Cultural Center in order to get a space that will unite in Bellevue all ethnic communities, and we need such a space. And this will take place in Washington State. At the national level, I listed here all the Romanian-American organizations with which we have been collaborating and organizing events for the past 2 years. So American-Romanian Coalition for Human and Equal Rights, Romanian United Fund, Romanians of Washington, D.C., Immigration Research Forum, Bucharest Inside the Beltway, Authentic Society for Romanian Language and Culture, and Fora that will be launched in September. And I'm part of the steering committee. ARCS has a voice and a vision to bring to the table the Federation of Romanian American Organizations. So this is, if you look at the bigger circle, the bigger picture, we are actually talking about, again, a global approach. We have already communities that have approached us to kind of export the model that we have. We hope that our model will inspire and maybe will generate a network of institutions that can model let's say, the model created by Jules Verne with the Alliance Française, where we will have cultural centers, language centers, and cultural centers at the same, in the same package. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for inviting us and for exchanging ideas with us. And I'm looking forward to my colleague's presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Baraboy. A very interesting and very comprehensive presentation of quite rich activity of your organization. Congratulations for the efficiency in building partnerships with the American authorities and entities, and also with Romanian ones in Romania and in the United States. that gives you a lot of potential and also widens your possibility of actions. We are very keen in observing, noticing, and supporting the activities of your organization there in Seattle. We are also very proud of what you're doing there and how you succeeded in making quite a good mixture between the academia, and the heritage, bringing identity, national heritage, and communities inside the academia gives you a certain new perspective of the future. And also I like very much the concept of world ambassador. Your messages are very well received here, and I'm sure that also the State Secretary Ursake, who is still online, got it all. And I'm sure that is a very good food for thought for my colleagues in Bucharest, as well as our colleagues here. Now, for the sake of diversity, because you talked about cultural diversity, and in order to give a different spin to our conversation inside our webinar, I would like to make a switch and to have a perspective of communication from the industry. And because I know that our colleague Ilana Marin is going to continue your presentation practically as a concept and as accomplishments, achievements in Seattle, Dr. Baraboy, I would like to ask Dr. Kosharka to intervene and to give us his presentation about a new perspective of teaching young adults and how to make them more proficient, and not only in communication but also professionally. So allow me please to introduce to you Dr. Professor Kosharka. So Professor Radu Kosharka is a journalist, communication strategist, top executive manager, trainer, and professor. He is associate professor at the University of Bucharest for the Faculty of Journalism and Communication Sciences. He started in 1994, 1996, holding the broadcast news courses. Currently, he teaches corporate communications. He has graduated from Bucharest Polytechnical Institute as technology engineer in 1989. Sorry, he switched to a journalism and communication career. He graduated several intensive courses in journalism and media management at the College of Communication of the State University of California, BBC World Service Center for Foreign Journalism in Western Virginia. Since 1990, he worked for the public Romanian television as a reporter, producer, editor, and news anchor. He was editor-in-chief of the News and Current Affairs and the main anchor of the Romanian public television between 1991 and 1992. In 1992, he was elected by the parliament, Romanian parliament, as a member of the newly created National Audiovisual Council, having major contributions to creating the private electronic media sector in the country. From 1994 to 2004, he has been the head of the news at the Tele7, Antenna 1, and he has been a part of the international team which launched the national TV television. All this time, he also acted as a news anchor and talk show host. He's been rewarded with 4 APTRs, or the National Association for Television Professionals prizes, the highest recognition of the Romanian TV industry. He held lectures at the Center of Independent Journalism and the Diplomatic Institute, Romanian Diplomatic Institute. In 2004, or between 2004 and 2010, he was the vice president of the Media Own Group and became an international consultant for communication strategy, working with multinational companies as Veolia and Bechtel. Between 2010 and 2020, he was the director of external relations and communication at the ANEL, So that is the Italian multinational electricity energy company and president of the board at the strategic company Cuprumin, having a management career with notable economic accomplishments. Thank you, Professor Kosharka, for joining us. I'm looking forward to your presentation, talking about teaching Gen Zers, the paradigm shift. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Consul General, and thank you for having me today. Congrats for your excellent idea to mark the 10th anniversary of the Romanian-American Strategic Partnership. Thank you for the interesting presentations made by the panelists until now. And let me share with you my presentation. Of course, I will speak as a beneficiary of the communication faculties.
Okay, thank you very much. We apologize for the technical debacle. I'm sure that we are going to solve that momentarily. Until then, I kindly ask Professor Ilana Marin from University of Washington, from Seattle, to give us her presentation, but not before introducing Dr. Marin. So Dr. Ilana Marin carries out her academic career both in the United States and in Romania, with a PhD in textual studies from the University of Washington, Seattle. If you can unmute, if you can mute yourself. Okay. Dr. Ilana Marin teaches interdisciplinary courses and on both sides of the Atlantic. She authored 5 books, among which a volume dedicated to contemporary re-evaluation of tragic myths, a hermeneutic approach to ancient Greek mythology in 2002, a monographic study on the pre-Raphaelite brotherhood, a narrative dimension of pre-Raphaelite painting, and a study examining Victorian writing and illustration. Her articles, published in collective volumes and academic journals, reflect her interests in 19th and 20th century manuscripts, world literature, the artistic legacy of communism, and the impact of iconic writers and artists of today's culture. Recently, she has focused on e-literature, digital art, and also published translations from contemporary Romanian women authors. She is a co-founder and currently the board chair of the Seattle nonprofit American-Romanian Cultural Society. That was very well described by Dr. Baraboy. Since November 2020, Dr. Marin is the acting director of the doctoral school Space, Image, Text and Territory of the University of Bucharest, where she coordinates doctoral degrees in cultural studies. This year, she became a member in the executive committee of the Romanian Forum of the Modern Language Association.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Professor Marin, it is a pleasure and an honor to have you today with us, with your impressive academic achievements. Thank you for taking our invitation. The presentation of Professor Marin is Global Literary Strategies in Teaching Romanian Literature, Art, and Film.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'd like to thank the participants who raised interesting issues to which I'd refer in my presentation, such as globalism, advocacy, also I would say comparative literature. Ilana Orlic presented her inspiring courses about comparative literature. So today I will share with you only a few of the major global literary studies strategies that Otilia and myself apply when we co-teach Romania Transformed, a class on Romanian literature, art, and film that we initiated in 2017 to make an academic statement about Romania's centenary, its continuation and contribution to the world's cultural patrimony, and its contemporary artistic achievements. We joined forces. Otilia has an expertise in French literature, civilization, and with mine in comparative literature, textual studies, and interdisciplinarity. We put to work our specializations in the framework of global literary studies. To talk about the global literary strategies, I need to go back in time and trace their roots. For many years, comparative literature was focused on European major, mostly Western masterpieces, ranging from Greek epic narratives and tragedies to modern and contemporary works, mostly Italian, French, and British, sometimes even German. The emphasis at the time was placed on their aesthetic and a historical value, and this direction relied heavily on Matthew Arnold's paradigm, according to which the best literature was, I quote, the literature that has managed to transcend local historical circumstances of its production and come to embody universal truths about reality and what it means to become human. And that's a quote from Paul Jay. It was a series of social, political, and civil rights movements combined with new theoretical trends such as deconstructivism, gender studies, multiculturalism, and postcolonialism that triggered the change in comparative literature. And the new focus was this time on difference, not on sameness, on hybridity, not on purity, on both textual and social powers of the literary production, and not on the either or exclusivist point of view. I'll start with talking about Goethe's Weltliteratur, a term he coined in 1820s, only years after the Congress of Vienna in 1814-15, where Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Great Britain, together with Sweden and Portugal, negotiated over territories in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars and came up with a policy of balance of power. The goal was to create, I quote, a stable transnational pan-European cosmos, as John Pizer put it in his chapter on Goethe in his 2019 book. In his context, open to cosmopolitanism, yet with obvious signs of nationalism, Goethe challenged the viability of national literature and provoked writers to work together to bring about a literature informed by the knowledge and insight of literary discourses around the world. We also learned from Goethe's conversations with Eckermann that he believed that the reception of an author in a different culture may facilitate new readings and tear off the labels attached to that author by his or her own culture. The examples provided in this respect were Thomas Carlyle's biography of Schiller, in which Schiller is presented not only as a poet, playwright, and academic, but also as a historian interested in the moral, intellectual efforts and the best method to produce them. And also, Shakespeare's fame was resurrected by Germans at the time, who valued his works much more than Shakespeare's fellow countrymen at the beginning of the 19th century. Cultural exchanges have proven to be beneficial to both parties
as each enriched its own perspective on itself and on the other. And this lesson is still valid today, and we apply it to our approach to Romanian culture. One example is our approach to film. We offer a critique of American Hollywood productions from a European perspective and a critique of Romanian films from the international critics' point of view, including American scholars. Thus, we preface our in-class analysis of Romanian films, giving students a sense of the absurdist communist propaganda, the terror instilled by communist Securitate, the uncertainties of the post-1989 Romanian society, generation clashes, and of course, the period of transition to a democratic society. Film clips and a survey of Romanian film industry show a synchronicity with the French industry, which launched the first movie. And we have to recall the fact that in 1896, only months after the first film was launched in Paris, the arrival of a train was actually screened in Bucharest at the headquarters of the French language newspaper. Gheorghe Marinescu, the famous Romanian surgeon, acquired the camera from a Frenchman cameraman and shot his first medical films, who actually received the applause from the Auguste Lumière himself. So going back to the theoretical repositioning of world literature, I have to admit that we have taken advantage of the tremendous expansion of the field since 1960. As you can see in this slide, then actually Western European literatures were considered to be world literature. And as the Swiss scholar Werner Friedrich said at a conference in the US, we should call our programs NATO literatures. A mention should be made that NATO at the time had only 15 countries, and only a quarter of them, actually their cultures and literatures, were studied in such programs. We are fully aware that the expansion of world literature is slow but encouraging, and we see that David Damrosch, a Harvard professor, is expanding the field tremendously through anthologies and through his books. But as I said, we are aware that the expansion is slow, and we have put our effort in aligning our teaching strategies to the discipline, so that to use the disciplinary jargon with which our students are familiar. While the theoretical framework of our class echoes our students' previous exposure in literature classes, the content is completely new. Our challenge is to make our students see the place of Romanian literature on the world literature map. And we select authors whose works are relevant both for Romanian and international literary canon, but we pay attention to the quality of the translations that we are using. This fact that we use text in translation creates a tension, you may say, with Spivak and Emily Apter's position. They are vocal advocates for studying literature and its language if possible together, or at least to think of translations as both necessary and impossible, as Spivak has argued several times in her articles, conferences, and books. So translation, we have to admit, is the language of globalization, And that's precisely why we incorporate in our lectures issues about Romanian authors' dialect, idiolect, deconstructing their textual fabric to bring out contradictions and subversive meanings, as in the case of Paul Celan. And here is a list of our readings. I haven't moved fast enough the slides. As is the case of Paul Celan's poems in Romanian, translated into English by Julian Semilian and Sanda Agalidi, in which we identify images recurrent in his later work. One particular word is discussed in relation to the challenges of translation. For example, the third stanza starts with ia in Romanian, and it was simply translated by shirt. That doesn't do justice to this beautiful Romanian blouse by any means. So to prove the complexity of Paul Celan's lyricism, we also show our students 3 versions of translations in which we prove the complexity of his polyglot versatility, and we try to show to our students how rich his vocabulary and imagery is. And yet there is another kind of translation that we also consider and present to our students, a transmedial translation. This makes the trauma of the Holocaust survivor more personal, as is shown by visual artworks, compensating for what words cannot express. Anselm Kiefer's and Belu Făinaru's works mix the phenomenal world, interpretation, and the metaphysical, thus demonstrating one more time that poetry has survived the horrors of the extermination camps without becoming barbaric, in spite of Theodor Adorno's statement. Dealing with multiple languages in which Romanian authors have written their works, German, French, English, we make a big deal about guiding our students through the labyrinthic language, the translators entangle, translating, poet, translating his language through the history of his or her nation state. And I was paraphrasing Spivak, translating into English. Ana Blandiana, in whose Samizdat poem, we read the pain inflicted by the communist state on women's bodies, and we discuss Children's Crusade, or the shortages, and we read and analyze everything, her famous poem now, and her successful at time endeavor to talk back to power in metaphors, as she famously said, gives us the opportunity to deconstruct her aestopic double discourse. Blandiana's contribution to Romanian civic society is also part of our presentation, and that's actually her activism that completes the unit dedicated to her work, thus responding to David Damrosch's most recent book, Comparing the Literatures from 2020, in which he dedicates a chapter on scholars whose teaching goes beyond the author's works and address their political views, quoting Shelley, who claimed that poets are unacknowledged legislators of the world. Damrosch underlines the importance of the critic, whose role Otilia and myself play for our students as well, and thus facilitate the reader's access to the freedom the literature enables. This is the moment where I should share that our approach is interdisciplinary, as you could have seen from my presentation. We promote a new way of thinking about an issue to produce questions about the world in general and the American perspective on the world in particular. We provide historical and geographical context. We put in dialogue literature and arts. culture and politics, aesthetics and ideology, fatherland and exile. And as Emily Apter maintained in her study Comparative Exile from 1995, our discipline, which she prefers to call comparative literature in order to draw attention to language and critical skills alike, is, I quote, unthinkable without the historical circumstances of exile. The impressive journeys to prominence of Ionescu, Cioran, Vișniec, Müller, Herta Müller, Norman Manea, and others are closely followed. We always underline their Romanianness. Selecting chapters from Romanian literature as world literature, a collective volume that brings together scholars on both sides of the Atlantic, and we use the volume for the course bibliography, we navigated the muddy waters of the 30s and 40s in Romanian history, the post-colonial dimension of communism imposed by the USSR on Romania, and the displacement which inherently and emphatically undoes, amends, reworks the spatiality and associated ideas and representations, while maneuvering identity into new positions and meanings. And that was a quote from Doris Mironescu. Herta Müller is read both through the lens of minority studies and gender studies, and we debate over the agency of her heroine, the power of the powerless, the land of the dispossessed, in parallel with the analysis of her style, imagery, non sequitur narrative, and point of view. A special place is reserved for Romanian-born artists such as Brâncuș, and of course, here you see the clip from the press, the American press at the time, and we all know about the trial that defined actually what is modern art. And we also talk about the revolutionary contributions to modernism and surrealism of Gerasim Luca, Marcel Iancu, and Victor Brauner. If I have to choose two words that are constantly recurring in our class, I would say they are the absurd and the surreal. Irrespective of the genre, location, and language, one way or another, Romanian authors, artists, and filmmakers touch on either, if not on both. To conclude, I would say that among the globally literary studies department offer, our class stands out due to its interdisciplinarity, engagement with global issues, consistency in addressing language and translation options, plurality of theoretical perspective matched with each author and artist, and the least, I would say the last but not least, the open debates on the center-periphery tension regarding the circulation of commodities and culture. And I will end with what Paul Jay said in his book, which I would say sums up very nicely what we do alongside our colleagues who teach global literary studies at the University of Washington. We create the locations, we study. This recognition ought to encourage us to continue to remap the geographies of literary and cultural forms. Thank you. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Marin. I'm sure that all your students consider themselves privileged.
I should add, I wanted to add at the beginning, but I was surprised that you shifted the program, changed the program. This is a class that is supported by both the University of Washington and ARCS. So it's a class also funded by the community as much as it is recognized but by the university and the Washington state institutions.
Yes, and I should add that that is entirely your merit and that of Dr. Taraboy, reason for which the President of Romania also awarded you both with one of the highest decorations that was for promoting Romanian language, Romanian language and culture in the United States, and I congratulate you again. Please do continue doing what you're doing, because it's a great thing, and the cultural dimension of the strategic partnership between Romania and United States has a concrete manifestations in this kind of projects and achievements at the academic level. Thank you for that. And now, allow me, please, to pass the word, and to give the floor to Professor Coșarcă. I apologize again for the technical difficulties that we encountered, but now they are solved. Thank you. You have the floor, Dr. Coșarcă.
Thank you. I hope you see my presentation now.
Yes, we can see that very well.
Okay. So, teaching genders, the paradigm shift. Actually, I will speak as a beneficiary of the communication faculties. As a media leader, as a corporate communicator, I had to act as an employer. So I had to hire many graduates of the communication faculties. Therefore, this is one of the main reasons I became a teacher, a professor from time to time, in order to help even me, myself, to get the best employees I needed. I'll start this presentation bearing in mind what George Orwell once said: each generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the previous one and wiser than the one that comes after it. So with this humble approach, I will try to profile this Generation Z in order to identify the best ways to adapt our teaching methods in order to make the education system more effective, the education process more effective. So briefly, Generation Z, people born between 1997 and 2012, is usually considered the most educated generation. The main members of the generations are self-focused, pragmatic, innovative. They have an entrepreneurial spirit. And most importantly for us is that this is the first digital native generation. For us, internet is still a miracle, but for them, it's just a utility. It's like electricity, like running water. They are characterized in many ways, but I will stress the most important for us, the communication teachers. This is the first generation that identified YouTube as their main learning source. For us, YouTube is a place where we used to find a Rod Stewart concert or a Federico Fellini movie or something like that. For this generation, YouTube is the learning source. Of course, you know, on YouTube, in 10 to 12 minutes, they can teach you anything. I mean, they can teach you how to do a pizza, how to pair the wine with a meal, how to do the Windsor knot to your tie. But strangely, they can teach you how to write a news story, how to write a press release, how to build a communication plan, which is, in a way, not a good news for us, the journalism, the communication teachers. Of course, we know that this generation is more open, is tolerant, is open to diversity. When they are asked about the big brother, when they are asked about privacy, they are asked about how they feel in front of all the surveillance cameras, their usual answer is, what do I have to hide? Of course, they didn't have the experience some older generations had about surveillance. So this is a very sincere answer. They expect the government to be more involved in solving the social issues, many issues of the society. This is a big difference from the previous generations, which prefer the government not to be involved so much. We usually talk about a generation gap. The good news is that there always has been a generation gap. All the generations had this feeling. The singularity is this unusual speed with which the society has developed in the past decades, the unusual speed of the technological discoveries, which had an incredible impact on our way of living. It's a generation which relies on internet versus the older generations, which are used to depend on themselves. In a way, it's living on internet versus using the internet. But another good news is that all the polls say that this generation is using the smartphones for text messaging, downloading apps, playing games, accessing websites, and live video calling. We, the teachers, except playing games, I suppose, we do the same things with the smartphones. So it's not a technological gap because we are not the average generation. Usually the teachers are close to the top of the generation. Of course, it's a cultural gap. I will start from the basic communication model, and I will analyze the impact of this technology leap for each element of the communication model. And I will start with the communication channel, the message, and the noise that disturbs the channel. Of course, the communication channel once was just the classroom or the amphitheater, which was a silent, respectful environment in which the students were admiring, were watching their master. Their master was usually the only source of information. Now, the communication channel is disturbed by the internet, which is a chaotic environment. It has no rules. It provides over communication. It has no value criteria. And, you know, strangely, all the names, all the facts have the same weight. Actually, the internet is not a library, it's a deposit, it's a book deposit, it's a warehouse. We don't have a librarian. We don't have criteria to classify the books, to choose the books. So if you are an educated person, you know how to manage. If you are not an educated person, and I mean educated in research, in scientific research, or in journalism, or in communication, you have a big problem understanding what you are searching at. It's enough to say that, for instance, Einstein is near the, let's say, snooker champion, or Shakespeare is near Stephen King, or Beethoven is near Lady Gaga. Of course, they are both musicians. The social psychologists tell us about the confirmation bias, which is very important when we talk about internet, because we are not searching for knowledge. we are searching for confirmation. We want the internet to confirm our preformed opinions, our prejudices. And I want to mention another interesting bias, which is the so-called equality bias, according to which, as we in Romanian used to say, the wiser concedes. So on social media, when a debate takes place, usually the wise guy, the expert, has to concede in order not to start a real fight. So the internet changed the way we read and think, because now we want the information to be instantaneous, to be pleasantly presented, and of course, confirming our opinion. Usually we read just the titles, and it developed resistance against long articles, complicated, complex content, and of course, we hate the lack of pictures. Another communication channel, the social media, creates confusion because now we have broadcasters and podcasters. Nobody tells people that broadcasters, the official classic broadcasters, are actually newsrooms run by editors, governed by journalism rules, by legal framework, and on the internet you have nothing like that. In the television world, we have the explosion of the news channels, and because they are 24/7 open, they need a lot of staff. Of course, it's not economic to have hundreds of television crews. Therefore, they created the talk show. The talk show on a news channel is a nonsense because talk show doesn't provide us with news. It provides us with commentaries. It creates confusion. In social media, we meet a parallel reality because it creates a need to show off. You know, every summer you have to post a photo from your holiday. Today, this year, it may be a holiday at the Black Sea coast, but next year it has to be a holiday on the Côte d'Azur. And the next year it has to be a holiday in the Maldives. Otherwise, you don't tell your viewers, you don't tell them a success story. We talked about the shrinking of the critical spirit, and a main idea is that people don't speak because they have something to say on social media, but mainly because they have to say something. And the public debate is much disturbed on the social media because usually people aim at the victory, not to find the truth. So it's no reflection time. And the problem is with the so-called keyboard courage. Professor Tom Nichols published a few years ago a very interesting book, The Death of Expertise. He says that on internet, people have equal access to information, but that doesn't mean that people are equally informed, because it depends on their cultural and education level. So we just have, in a democracy, we have equal rights, but our opinions should not be equal because we have different qualifications in different fields. The competence actually is a mix between education, talent, experience, and confirmation by peers. This is what we are looking for in the academic environment. Professor Nichols complains about a trend of retreat among academics, and later on I will speak about this. Of course, the academics, seeing that the experts are not valued so much on the internet, they tend to retreat in their environment, exchange opinions, qualified opinions among experts. The social media determined the so-called big sword. Bill Bishop invented this term, which refers to the antisocial effect of social media, we tend to disconnect from the rest of the world and stay connected just with the people that share our views. Coming back to the Generation Z, let's keep in mind that they use smartphones in a staggering proportion of 97%. 63% have tablets, and 85% are, of course, YouTubers. If we talk about the generations just to have a fresh idea in mind, the most recent generations are X, Y, Z. These are the years, and of course, we are talking about the Generation Z. The members of these generations are our students. This is why we are very interested in. Coming back to the communication model, let's talk about the receiver. The receiver is the student. So he inherited a strong economy, but the COVID-19 reshaped the landscape and introduced the uncertainty in the life of these youngsters. Their exposure to communications, of course, created a hypercognitive generation. Of course, they feel very comfortable with collecting and cross-referencing many sources of information, with integrating virtual online and offline experiences. 45% of them are online constantly. As I said, they live on internet. And 44% are several times a day for a long time online. Of course, they are puzzled by the number of sources of information, and this is one of our roles to help them getting through. And they are confused, very interesting, by the new role models, which are not their professors, but the new influencers on the net, which plead for immediate action, for let's go make easy money now. On internet, we can find 19-year-old influencers which just made $1 million in the past couple of months, investing on Forex or betting on sports agencies. So why spending your most beautiful years of your youth in the university when you can make this amount of money? This is the noise we've been talking about. The receiver is also a consumer, because now the education system is private in its most important part. So this student has a different approach to learning. He's not the young guy searching for the light of knowledge, but now he's a customer buying a product. Because of that, because they react, businesses, of course, discovered first that these people react differently to marketing campaigns. So they are pragmatic, they are analytic about their commercial decisions. Therefore, the businesses now rethink the way they deliver value to these consumers. So they design profile marketing campaigns, especially for Gen Zers. These Gen Zers expect more innovation from companies, but of course, they expect more innovation from their teachers. They want digital experiences from the businesses, but of course, they expect that from their courses too. They value individual expression. Usually, they are not running for luxury labels, but they are looking for uniqueness. They made choices from ethical reasons. And strangely, in a way, they're looking for unisex things. In general, they are obsessed with companies that mirror their ideals. The McKinsey consultancy called this generation the true generation. Well, remember the pen and paper. This is what we should tell them from time to time, because all of them are handling their tablets while we are lecturing the courses. there is a scientific reality. Handwritten notes lead to greater retention of data than the typed ones. So I recommend to myself and to my colleagues to write on the blackboard or to recommend them to write down some main ideas, some keywords, some iconic names or important figures, because they will keep them much more easily in mind. As I said, the receiver is a YouTuber, so these gensers are accustomed to switching between many information, short bursts of information, and offered by the social media. Therefore, they have acquired an inability to focus or analyze lengthy pieces of information. In the classroom today, the scientists say that the attention span is just 7 to 10 minutes. Therefore, we have to, as teachers, we have to reshape the course and into smaller modules and to create some breaks and to fill them with videos, funny quotes, and allow them to digest, to process the information. The receiver is also a visual learner and also a challenger. Scientists from Harvard Medical School, for instance, say the part of the brain that dictates visual ability is significantly more developed than that of older generation. Even their millennial peers, which, you know, the millennial peers are just a few years older. So they are hands-on learners. They prefer to learn by doing rather than being told or rather than reading many books. So they respond to visual learning, to challenges. So interactivity is key in a course. Education games, which allow them to understand the notions taught. The receiver also has an emotional problem. The gensers experience high rates of depression and anxiety. In a decade between 2007 and 2017, there was a 59% increase in these cases of depression and anxiety among these youngsters. Therefore, they need some much more help from their teachers. Therefore, we need to sometimes personalize the lessons. Sometimes we need to give extra help, even if it means for us to work more. The best idea is instead of having a live talk in our office at the faculty, we can use the online communication, which is more familiar with them, and they really expect that. We have to keep in mind that the COVID-19 produced great disturbances. So these young people have public speaking skills affected. They are already emotional, but because they lived 1 year and a half isolated in their homes in front of their laptops or with their smartphones holding their smartphones, they don't know how to really socialize, which is awful for the next communicators if we talk about this specialty. Now, back to the message, which is the product. Of course, we have to move from classic long movies to television series. If we talk about our lecture, we have to use videos and sound bites, and very, very important, we said that this is a very pragmatic generation. So proven usefulness of our courses is necessary, is mandatory. We have to tell them at each step we make, this is how you will use this notion. This is how you will use the principle. This is if we teach the Pythagoras theorem, next thing we should say is how they will use it in the real life. Case studies and best practices are key in our course. If we structure it more like a bullet list, not all the course, but as a conclusion and underline some keywords, we help them a lot. You know, we have to move a little bit from theory to a list of do's and don'ts to give them tips and tricks. I'm talking about communication, practical communication mainly. Why? Because during their life, their professional life, this is what they will read. Tips and tricks, do's and don'ts. And of course, we can use infographics and text boxes, which are very useful to remind. Well, the sender, which is the professor, has a big problem, a status shift. He's not the exclusive source anymore, so he's not the infallible master. Now he's challenged, he's checked instantaneously. During our lecture, they can check us on the smartphone, they can compare us with famous speakers on the net, with famous professors, they can check the figures, the years, the names we say, so we have to be very, very careful. And sometimes they assess us even for bridging the cultural gap through our dress code, our language, the examples we give them, the contemporary trends we invoke. So what do we have to do? We have to win back our mentor status or to strengthen the mentor status. What shall we do to validate again our status as professor, our moral and professional authority? Well, remember what competence is: education, talent, experience, and peer recognition. So I remember what Hemingway said, you know, one of the most important two things if you want to write a novel is to be a very serious person, Hemingway said. Unfortunately, the second thing is talent. So we have to use these truths in our job because we talk about communication, which is a science, but when we apply it in real life, actually is more an art. So let's use technology indeed and a wide range of communication tools. For Gen Zers, technology is part of life. Remember that. So we can create a Facebook page dedicated to our classroom. We can create an Instagram page. We can give them some homeworks and tell them to post them on this page, to ask their colleagues to make commentaries, and they will feel happy because we use the newest communication technology. The style of the lecturing should shift a little bit from formal to, let me say, smart, informal. From one-man show to a leading actor in a play with multiple actors. So we have to empower our students to play different roles, especially in communication. We can give them different roles, exemplifying the principles and the ideas we teach them, especially in the best practices, when we present best practices or study famous cases. From fluent interrupted lectures to catchy dynamic episodes, and of course, smart breaks marked by funny videos. From a secluded academic to a public intellectual. This is the road which a communication professor should go these days. Why? Because this is a pragmatic generation and they want to have a proof each day, each minute, that their communication professor is a communicator. They want to see their professor in a television show debating with a famous TV personality, and they will be proud of him, and he will come back with a higher professional authority because he had just proven its ability with a famous TV personality. As a communication professor, we should become influencers to be understood by our students, to become involved citizens in the society's problems. Very important for this generation is if we can bring our personal work experience to the amphitheater. Remember what Nassim Taleb said? He invented the principle called skin in the game, meaning put your skin in the game. Okay, so don't just tell them about communication, show them communication. So Gensers value authenticity. The sender, which is the professor, should of course be the mentor. So interactivity is key. They want immediate feedback on different assignments. We can use storytelling techniques to capture their attention. We can also invite special guests. Thank God, if we are mathematicians, we cannot invite Pythagoras. But if we teach communication, of course, we can invite journalists, TV personalities, and so on. As I said, we have to be exact in the amphitheater when we say numbers, figures, names, years, quotes, because we can be instantaneously checked. We can use short writing assignments instead of the classic assignments using communications technology. Now is key for them to be able to express in 10 sentences a very complex idea or to describe a very complex subject. As YouTubers, they like very much, and if we are honest with ourselves, we like very much pictures and short captions. And always provide a rationale why this lesson is important, how is it applicable in the real world. I will end by talking about the context in which we are teaching our students no matter what, but especially communication. There is a business production concept called time to market. Time to market was invented by the automotive industry. It was the time from the scratch, from the blueprint, to the moment the car was in a showroom, was on the market. We can use the concept for our graduates too. When they graduate the faculty, they have to be hired, they have to be employed, they go to a company. Before internet, or even 10 to 15 years ago, a major company had enough time to teach them, to train them, to move them from a department to other, to give them small assignments, to put them in larger teams, just to be apprentices. Now, this time is very small, and in many companies, it doesn't exist anymore. So the time to market for our graduates is non-existent, actually. So we have to keep in mind that despite the fact that we may be professors, we may be scientists, authors, we write and publish books about these fabulous communication sciences, but we have to keep in mind that the product of our activity, and I'm on purpose using this word, this term, is to make them employed, to allow them, to help them to be employed. So we have to question ourselves and to reimagine or to reshape the curricula. I know we have all these titles, we have all these courses in the curricula, but are they for real? Are they really helpful for these people? Are they able to get out on the doors of the faculty and be immediately employed? The right answer is no. And I'm telling you from my personal experience, I had to hire young journalists in my newsroom, and I had to give them to write a news story, of course, to start, just to start. And they were not able to, but not because they were not taught to write a news story, but because a news story is not a homework. A news story is written in 30 minutes in a noisy newsroom where 20 people get crazy, shout, run, watch the other television channels. They update the information, and in this time, in 30 minutes, you have to deliver your news story. It's quite a difference from a homework. From a news story, you can write as a student from today to tomorrow, on from today to the next week's meeting. It's quite a difference. So we should ask ourselves, and we should try to reshape the curricula. Are we really prepared the next leaders? Because the graduates are the next leaders of the society. Are we prepared them for public speaking? How could we prepare them for public speaking in the last year and a half? Of course, we could tell them how to deliver a public speech, but was that for real on a laptop? Because a public speech means the emotion, the excitement, the stage, the audience, how you shape, how you tailor your message to the audience, the words you use, when they get bored, how to stop, how to make a funny break. We cannot tell all these things online, via online methods. So there is 1 year and a half which is missing from their education from those points of view. Are we really teaching these graduates, the future graduates, the negotiation? They will get into a business. They will start a business, or they will be hired in a company. They should know how to negotiate a contract, a position, a salary, an income, a bonus, a organization chart with their bosses. Do they know how to create employee engagement, how to create enthusiasm in their team, how to manage a corporate communications, which is so complex, internal communication, external communication, institutional relations? Do they know how to make fundraising if they go to work for an NGO? Fundraising, this is an art, is not a science. This is personal contact, physical contact. You have to be persuasive, convincing. You have to make that company happy because they give you $100,000 for a noble cause. Can they do that? Not sure about that. Community affairs. Can they speak convincingly with mayors and peasants? Do they know really marketing and sales, which is key for any business, customer care, customer relations? So I believe we've got, despite the fact that probably all these concepts are the names of some courses, we have to check if all these teachers, all these professors have the practical experience to educate these people not to be graduates, but to become employees immediately. And if we prepare them for businesses, but we have to prepare them for political and state institutions. We have to prepare them for competitive environment. Do they know how an organization really works? No, they don't, because an organization is very complex. It requires from a new employee, for a communicator especially, it requires diplomacy, political ability, speech skills, team building skills, many skills that are usually not taught precisely in a faculty. Do they know to tell success stories? Do they know how to build a success story? And by the way, when I was a communicator in a major corporation, we had a seminar called, strangely, "What was my best mistake?" So you can imagine people sitting in a conference room together with their colleagues and bosses saying, I know, I can tell you my best mistake. Well, usually when you're asked, what is your best mistake? You respond in a similar way when you are asked, what is your defect? Well, my defect is that I'm too honest. I believe in people, which is not really a defect, it's a quality, but we don't have the power to recognize. We may be lazy. We may not be very clever. We cannot say that. So what is my best mistake? This is the no blame culture which modern corporations develop. So we have to prepare them for that. Remember that they are lacking socializing. They were just tapping the keyboard, especially in the last 15 to 16 months. They are missing the real handshaking. As communicators, as future leaders, they have to know how to shake a hand, which is not an easy thing to do because it transmits a lot of things about your personality, about your status, and about your message. Remember that because of the COVID, these students were missing almost half of their university life. They didn't feel the excitement of the exams because their exams were online. They didn't know their colleagues. They didn't meet their professors. And remember that too many brilliant graduates do not become experts, and many of them become unemployed. We talk a lot about artificial intelligence. Yes, artificial intelligence will solve many of our our tasks during our job. But there are some tasks that probably won't never be solved by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence cannot negotiate on behalf of us, cannot bring enthusiasm to a team, and this is what a communicator and a leader does. Because actually, we prepare the future leaders. The communicators are the future leaders. We live in the communication era. Therefore, the communicators should be kings. Therefore, we, as teachers and professors, have the duty to pave their way to the throne. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Kosharka. A very precise, comprehensive, and interesting X-ray image of the educational process, new educational process for the new generation, the so-called Z generation, the same that Dean Alina Bărgăoanu talked about in her first presentation. You described in a very synthetic way how we should reconstruct the message, how we should change the attitude and the tools of the sender, of the mentor, reminded us about the conflict between generations and how we see differently the future that the mentor wants to design for the student and for which he or she thinks that the student is not prepared for or not enough, and the real future that is going to be lived, built by the student and led by the student himself or herself. It's a good question if the future that we are foreseeing for the young students is the same future that is going to take place indeed, and if they are good for the future, for our future, or if we are good for their future. That's a matter of perspective, and of course that the observation that universities should deliver not only graduates but proficient employees is a really good one and should be minded in any educational strategy. I feel so lucky, to tell you the truth, that I had the opportunity to host these presentations. I learned a lot from the panelists. I could see, I could learn new things about education and critical thinking as a long-term answers to contested and uncertain world, in a contested and uncertain world, the same contested and uncertain world that Professor Koșarcă talked about with the new approach of the Gen Z, the Z generation. We had the opportunity of finding out how the Romanian Studies program built in the Arizona State University and how it develops as a core of an entire cultural current in a university, bringing together not only a national identity or national literature, but also an entire Eastern European legacy, heritage here in the United States, in the state of Arizona. The presentation of Dr. Imbarus, the mindset and mindfulness, was really mind-blowing. Excuse my vocabulary. It's really interesting to see the psychological approach of an educational system and what should take into account a mentor when he or she teaches a student in any field. Also, we could see how a huge Romanian heritage program grew and is developing in Seattle at the University of Washington, and how two amazing, brilliant Romanian scholars are leading this program to great success. That it is expanding in the United States. It doesn't stay only in Seattle. It's really expanding, and we are so happy to see that happening. It's been a privilege for me, a blessing for the Consulate General of Romania in Los Angeles to have the opportunity to having you here and to be able to put together all these ideas. I propose to make a repository of your presentations here at the Consulate General of Romania, and we will be happy to share the information in this repository of your presentation, if you agree to that. I would like to thank you for your participation in this symposium. I'm looking forward to see the recording. You know, everything has been recorded and is going to be processed and published on the official channel, YouTube channel of the Consulate General of Romania. Yes, Professor Koșarcă, we will use those tools and we will try to be proficient and efficient in giving the right message to the beneficiary. And of course, we are looking forward to having, I don't know, grading from you, such a good specialist in this kind of tools promotion. And I'm also looking forward to having you all in our future online events, and not only. Let's hope that we will be able very soon to organize in-person events here in the United States, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Seattle, Silicon Valley, or in a different city, or Denver, because we have people from Denver here with us today, or in Bucharest or a different university city in Romania. I'm very grateful for having you here, and good night for our colleagues from Romania, and have a beautiful afternoon here in the United States. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.